from the low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Colby Marchio. He does such great work over at Your Betting News with the show Up Your Units. We're going to be chatting about the Illinois teams with him as he is based out there in the great state of Illinois. We're going to be also diving in on some of the system plays that he's got in college basketball. We'll take a look at a few matchups for Wednesday and so much more. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR. They're making it easier to get it in the game than ever before because when you go to better.app, that's BETR.app, and you put in that promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD, that gets you $10 free. All you do is take a look at a player's stats, decide if they're going to go over or under, utilize that 10 free bucks, and boom, you're all good to go. And we're all good to go to take a look at what was a fun college basketball Tuesday. Let's recap it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Michigan State all over Kentucky in the Champions Classic, 83-66. The second SEC offense that they've been able to slow down as for Kentucky. They go 7 of 30 from three-point range. They had their rough night number 1 against Nichols, and then after that they were able to right the ship. But in this game they lose a rebound battle 42-28. They go 7 of 30 from three-point range. Yeah, Ortega away give you 12 points in this one, but for Kentucky, even though they were able to do a solid job winning the turnover battle, Michigan State, who had been shooting about 22% from 3, they get hot from 3. Jackson Kaler, 2 of 2 from the outside, 20 points. Trey Ford, 13 points, and off the bench, 15 unexpected points from Kurt Tang. So that was a nice quality win for Michigan State. And then in the other game, Kansas had a chance to be able to cover against Duke, but they let go the rope late. Duke is able to get the win. They get the cover by a count of 78-66 for Kansas. Yeah, Trey White be able to supply the team with 22 points, but they really got nothing off the bench for Kansas. Just 4 of 21 from 3. Now, Duke only goes 7 of 26 from the outside, but Cam Boozer continues to impress. 18 points, 10 rebounds. Isaac Evans, he goes 3 of 7 from the outside, 16 points, was one of the few guys in this game that was able to make an outside shot. And for Duke, they win the rebound battle 41-30 to be able to get the job done in that one. Those were really the main 2 highlight games, but that said, we did have a few other ranked teams in action, and with regards to the ranked teams, it was a little bit, shall we say, hit or miss in terms of them being able to cover numbers, as Arkansas, they were really tested by Winthrop, 84-83. They just barely eked this one out, as for Winthrop, 15 out of 31 from 3. Kareem Rozier, who comes on over from Duquesne, 7 of 10 from 3. Did a nice job leading the team, 23 points. He throws in there 5 assists as well. And for Winthrop, they did a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Only 10 turnovers in this game, but the way that Arkansas pulls it out, how about 26 points off the bench for Malik Thomas? He was able to go 10 of 20 from the floor, and for this Arkansas team, they got to the free throw line more and they hit those free throws. 20 out of 22 at the charity stripe to be able to just avoid that upset. And for Arkansas, they also won the rebound battle 33-30. And then with North Carolina, a pesky test from Navy. Navy's able to hold in there throughout. For Navy, they lose this game 73-61. They were catching well north of 24 points, so a very nice, easy cover there. And the North Carolina defense looking a little bit improved this season. Navy only goes 6 of 21 from the outside, but for North Carolina, they had a little bit of a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball in this one. 13 turnovers to the 6 of Navy, and man, that was really able to come alive. Caleb Olson, he's been doing it all for this North Carolina team. 12 boards, 4 steals, 23 points, and then you did have Luke Brogovich be able to come in, give you 16 points, and Kyan Evans, very rough game for him. He did have 6 assists, but also 3 turnovers and just 3 points for the transfer out of Colorado State. I do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, so currently doing this as UCLA is all over Sacramento State, 50-29 with about 12 minutes remaining in the second half. We shall see if they get the cover or not, but they are certainly going to be able to pull out that win. But this was a game that was not able to be pulled out by the favorite, as you had a nice moneyline underdog winner with Maryland Eastern Shore in double overtime, who had been held to fewer than 60 points in all of their games against D1 opponents entering in. They win 83-82. If you, like me, had the under in this game, having it toasted in double overtime was not great, but yay verily to Maryland Eastern Shore, who was able to go 10-27 from 3, and that is a less than savory home loss there for Longwood, which the Lancers look like they're not going to be the same team of a year ago, and Boise State certainly not looking like the same team of a year ago. They do get the job done against Wichita State, and they got back to their defensive roots, but this was a 62-59 slobber knocker between these two teams, and for Wichita State, Keenan Giles, a transfer from UNC Greensboro, helped them stay lively in this one. For Boise State, they do go 7-17 from three-point range. Andrew Meadow was able to go 3-5 from the outside, but Dylan Andrews, 10 points, 7 assists. You're expecting maybe a little bit more out of him because he was a starter over at UCLA a few seasons ago, and for this Wichita State team, they did a pretty solid job on the glass. They won that battle by a count of 38-32. San Diego looking a little bit revamped, a quality win and cover for them against Grambling, as they do get the job done in that game by a count of 78-68, and this was a pretty quality winner as well. If you had Presbyterian with the points, they hold in there against Cal, and Presbyterian right now, bottom 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, playing some pretty rock solid defense, 67-57. Cal, who had been covering pretty much every game except for this one, they do pull out the outright win, but for Presbyterian, they go 7-20 from three-point range. Cal Parrish, he was able to go 5 of 11 from three-point range, and Presbyterian won the rebound battle 34-30. Your two main big men didn't even have big games in this one. Jalen Peterson, great name. Jonah Pierce, they only combined for 6 rebounds, but they did a nice job by committee of holding in there, as John Camden, 20 points for Cal, helped them stave off the outright upset in terms of more of the teams in power conferences. Nice season win and cover for Texas. They completely lead base Rider by a count of 99-65. For Rider, they actually go 7-20 from three-point range, but they allowed Texas to just completely have their way with regards to them down low. As for Texas, they were able to go 33 of 60 from the floor. You had Cameron Heidi throw in there a nice quality 20 points on 6 of 9 three-point shooting, very nice. And then how about 9 of 11 from the floor, 8 of 8 from the free throw line out of Dalen Swain to just completely take control of this game. You had another scare for Utah. They have won outright every one of their games. They have yet to cover any of these, though. 85-77. Purdue Fort Wayne able to hold in there, and Purdue Fort Wayne only goes 9-27 from 3, 12-29 from the outside for Utah. They might have one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. Another big performance for Terrence Brown, 27 points. He's now had at least 26 points in 3 of the team's last 4 games, so he's been bailing them out, but it's got to be a little bit of a concern for them. And then this was a game where there was no concern for Iowa. They actually really have been able to be very efficient on offense here this season. How about 99-70? They take it to Southeast Missouri State as Alvaro Fergilius. He was able to come in there and give you 16 points, but really a balanced effort. Cam Manny Wu with 12 points. Bennett Sturts, 15 points, 9 assists. You had also 10 points off the bench from a little bit more of an unheralded guy, Trevin Jarrett, the 6'11" freshman from the great state of Iowa. So a nice quality winner there. And Minnesota, after they got a very, very unexpected test over the weekend from UW Green Bay, 66-54. They win, but they come nowhere close to covering a big number against Chicago State. That was the line right around about like 27.5. And for Minnesota, you did have Cade Tyson do a swell job being able to give this team 22 points, but clearly this is a team that's been a little bit hit or miss, and they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Jalen Crocker Johnson as well. So something that you do want to be taking note of in this game. He was able to be out there. He gave the team 15 points, and they needed it because they only got 6 total points off the bench. So that was a nice quality cover for our good friends, the Cougars of Chicago State, and you had a nice quality cover if you took this team as well. As Providence absolutely lambasted New Hampshire, this by a count of 98-66, and I believe that Providence has played every one of their games to the over thus far, as they go 10-26 from three-point range. You had the duo in the backcourt, Jalen Sellers along Jason Edwards, be able to supply the team with a combined 44 points. And Oswin, I can't say the last name, he gave the team 11 rebounds. So good on Oswin for being able to up out there. New Haven, depending upon your closing number, was able to get there against Seton Hall, 68-45. The final, this closed in a lot of places with New Haven being a 25.5 point underdog. Very clear that this New Haven team not going to be providing a lot of offense, as they had 14 turnovers and 17 made field goals in this one. And for Seton Hall, not necessarily a go-to scorer right now. Tawan Simpkins was able to give you 18 points off the bench, so still searching for a little bit of an identity, but 5-0 is 5-0. And with regards to the Rutgers Scarlet Knights staying out there in the great state of New Jersey, unable to get a cover against American, 80-71 in the final. And American, another over. They have been playing quite a bit more up-tempo than they have in past seasons. They go 12-32 from three-point. And for Rutgers, Dylan Grant was able to supply that team with 22 points. The NJIT transfer in Tyreek Francis, he was able to do a solid job in terms of being able to give that team double figures as well. And this one is just going final. Troy is going to get the job done against San Diego State. 2 seconds remaining with San Diego State going to the free throw line, 88-84. Same Troy team that had lost to Cal State Northridge, a.k.a. CSUN. They go out there and they had themselves a nice expose against the San Diego State team that is still dealing with the injury to Magoon Gwath. They've got just a few guys that are banged up in general. And for San Diego State, they do go 7-16 from three-point range. But for San Diego State, despite winning the rebound battle by a count of 41-28, they lose a turnover battle 17-9. And stepping up in a big way for Troy was Victor Valdez along Thomas Dowd. They were able to combine for 41 points, so a very nice quality win for them. Washington is currently, as I'm doing this, in Southern overtime against Southern. Now, it looks like they should be able to get the job done against Southern, but man, getting a double overtime scare, that's not necessarily the most savory thing in the world. And Florida State very clearly is looking to play some up-tempo offense. They get the win, but no cover against UT Martin. This by a count of 87-73. The Skyhawks have been able to make you a little bit of money, and Cam Mills, the freshman for Florida State, looking pretty rock solid. He was able to supply that team with 17 points. Princeton not looking like the same team that they were a season ago. They get lambasted by Iona, 89-69, and this was a number that opened up in a lot of places, 4.5. Money came in on Princeton, and they went 4 of 24 from three-point range. Not great, to say the least, and 6 different players for Iona was able to reach double figures, so whole was greater than some of its parts out there, and this whole was pretty rock solid as well. How about South Carolina absolutely taking it to Radford, 87-58 the final. South Carolina looking a little bit better on offense. They've got Michi Johnson back this season, and it wasn't even like Michi Johnson had a great game. He had 2 more points than myself, but Eli Ellis comes off the bench, supplies 14 points. For Radford, they lose the turnover battle 14-12, and for South Carolina, they win the rebound battle 40-26 as Mongolian Mike, 12 points, 10 assists. I can't say the last name, so I just always call him Mongolian Mike, but Mongolian Mike goes out there. He helps the team be able to get the job done, and Samford, they get the job done against Louisiana, 93-66 the final. The Samford team went 11-31 from 3, and you've got Abuka Okiri, who is looking really good. He's averaging over 20 points as a freshman. He was able to supply that team with 26 points, so a nice quality winner out there. And Xavier has been rough to begin the season. Well, they do take it to Old Dominion, 99-69, as Trey Carroll, he was able to put in there a nice 20 points for Xavier, so they right the ship, and all of a sudden, Kent State overs have been hitting like wildfire this year. They were able to take it to Eastern Kentucky, this by a count of 93-78 to Recco Gillespie, another double-double, 25 points, 11 rebounds out of him, and IU Indy, another over for them, 103-91. They fall to Charleston Southern, and Charleston Southern in some places open up the underdog. They close as a 1.5 point favorite. They do a really nice job in terms of getting it cooking in the first half with 61 points. The total close in a lot of places in that neighborhood about 188.5. So yeah, I had a less clearance for the over than what you'd think, but Alan Sumler off the bench for Charleston Southern, 29 points, and for IU Indy, they go 12 of 20 at the free throw line, so that was a little bit costly, and there was a combined 33 turnovers in that game, which is actually sadly low for an IU Indy game. So we've got a lot of intrigue, a lot of fun that's happening in college basketball right now, including the fact that Texas State, they won a nice slog against Abilene Christian, 63-49, and this team has been able to make you some money. They took it a little bit on the chin, though, on Tuesday. Arkansas Pine Bluff, they do fall by a count of 106-60, and probably the biggest upset of the night, Rhode Island. They go on the road. They take it to a Yale team that had looked very dominant in their first 3 games of the year. Yale was able to completely hammer Quinnipiac by 37 points on the road. On the road, they take down Navy by 29. In this game, they fall 86-77 as Rhode Island goes 11 of 24 from 3. Yale just 6 of 18 from the outside. And for Rhode Island, Jonah Hinton, well, he was hitting it hard in this one in terms of putting in the buckets. 24 big points out of him. Rhode Island actually loses a rebound battle 31-30, but they did a nice job in terms of being able to hit those threes, and they do find a way to persevere. And if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball, still with like 2 or 3 games outstanding from the slate for Tuesday, but if you looked at the games for Tuesday, the unders were hitting in the first 47 games on the betting board, 26 unders to 20 21 overs. Meanwhile, favorites, they went just 21-26-1 against the spread, so you also had to push with regards to those totals as well. But overall for the season, we now have unders in the lead on overs, 341 unders at 331 overs, and for favorites, they still have been able to have a little bit of value in terms of the road favorites, as the road favorites are actually the ones that are doing the best. They're at 43, 39, and 3 against the spread, but overall favorites are now below 50%, 333, 338, and 8 against the spread. So the unders and the underdogs starting to bark, and this guy, he always gives us a lot of bark, and he does a great job of breaking down this great game. Coming next, how about if we do chat with our good friend Colby Marchio, does great work over at Your Betting News right here on Casips with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Decent Family Podcast. Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it's great to get this man aboard. He'd always did a great job when he joined me in my baseball podcast. Now he's doing a tremendous job on the college hoops front as we've got Colby Marchio aboard. He does great work over at Your Betting News. He does a great job with the show Up Your Units and so much more. I know that he's dialed in on a little bit of everything, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Colby M. Betts. And Colby, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
It's an absolute honor to finally be on the basketball show, Greg. And I just want to say, I think it's hysterical that all of my friends that you have on here feel the need to mention my name. So I'm just going to not mention theirs to keep this bit going. But it's an honor, Greg, and I'm so excited basketball is here. College basketball is here because I need that break from baseball because it's the longest season of all sports, in my opinion. And I believe it is because that's math. So, yeah.
Oh, yes. And I know you're a man out there in the great state of Illinois. We've got a lot of intrigue with regards to the Illinois teams. You're currently doing this podcast as you're wearing a DePaul Blue Demon shirt. And I want to get your thoughts as to the teams that we've seen in the state of Illinois. We'll dive in on the Fighting Illini taking on Alabama in a minute or so, but feels like we've had some, shall we say, up and down hoops to say the least with the teams like UIC, your Blue Demons, Illinois State. It's been a very interesting state for basketball this season.
Yeah, DePaul basically ended Loyola's season in an exhibition. It was fantastic. The funny thing is about Illinois teams, I don't typically pay attention to them. I definitely pay attention to DePaul as a two-time alum, so I kind of have to. But I can't bet on these games, and there's 400 more each day, so I typically don't pay attention. I will have thoughts on that Illinois game that you were about to talk about, but it's not the greatest state for college hoops, nor really any other college sports unless you're Illinois for the most part. And I know you're waiting for me to just go on a rant about DePaul. I don't have many thoughts at the moment about where the season is at the moment after back-to-back losses. Losing to Buffalo kind of ruined my hopes for the season because I'm always a sucker for a second year under a new coach. The utmost respect for Chris Holtmann. I think everything he's doing for DePaul is something I've never experienced from a head coach on the men's side of the basketball team. And I was a student since 2018 to 2021. And I hated all the coaches. I hate Leto, burning passion. If Dave Leto's listening, I think you don't know anything about basketball. You had two NBA players who are still playing right now on the team, second worst team in the Big East. Make that make sense. And then Tony Stubblefield, no comment. No comment whatsoever. Chris Holtmann is fantastic for the culture. And if anything, he cares. And if they even just get to the tournament, Greg, I think he deserves a statue for building brick by brick, like he says, a team worth talking about. And I just want that. I want a team worth talking about. I paid all that tuition money. I just want a team worth talking about, Greg.
Oh, man, and trust me, I want that on my side as well. So I had a cousin that went to DePaul, and that was back during like the 2015/18 era. So, yeah, you've seen some bad basketball. My cousin saw some bad basketball. And frankly, over the last 20 years, it's just been awful. Ever since Quentin Richardson left the program, and it's not been great, to say the least. So bad.
It's also sad seeing Connor Enright killing it in Indiana. I knew that kid was awesome last year, but good for him for finding a better home. And it makes sense going back to play with the Freezes, the DeFreezes, excuse me. And that team's going to be awesome. That team's extremely underrated right now. I don't know if they changed the rankings of them being ranked, but that team is legit.
Yes, absolutely. And that has been the big issue for DePaul, trying to be able to find that point guard to be able to take over for Connor Enright. And when it comes to the other Illinois team, this is going to be the big marquee game that we're going to be seeing really on Wednesday. You've got two of them. Obviously, UConn versus Arizona is big, but Illinois versus Alabama. This is going to be some good, clean family fun with a nice, hearty 178.5 to 179 total. Illinois is a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. What do you make out of this game, especially with the fact that Tomislav Ivisic is still very questionable? It seems a little bit more promising that he might be able to play in this game, but you've got two teams that they're looking to gun it, to say the least, and you've got two teams that they're explosive on offense, and I don't know if we're going to see a lick of defense in this game.
No, and I think that's what everyone wants. I lean with the over. I mean, I kind of have to. Both teams play at lightning speed. I don't want to take a side. I know my good friend Nate Hornung's going to be on Illinois. I kind of want to see how Alabama plays. They just got absolutely embarrassed at home against Purdue, and Purdue made them shoot threes, which is not a part of their game, and they made them slow down the tempo, which made me nearly want to bet Purdue to win the Natty, just based off going into someone else's home and dictating tempo, which is something you don't see in college hoops. I have so much respect right now for Purdue. I want to see Nate Oates adjust that. And Illinois' got size. Alabama doesn't have size. We saw it against Purdue. They struggled going up against teams with size. So if they can turn it around, then now I can adjust and go move it forward with betting Alabama. But I don't want to pick a side. If you told me to, I'd go Illinois just because of how bad Alabama looked against Purdue. So I think there's going to be 1,000,000 points. I hope there's 1,000,000 points, because who doesn't like a zip ball game? So I think it's going to be one of the better games. It's obviously, there's another better one because I'm a sucker for a Big East team. I would lean with the over, even if it gets up to 180.
My pushback here is I absolutely love the games that say under the total of 120. I'm a sucker for
under, Greg.
I love slogs. Like, when you get these two teams where it's like, hey, that looks like me at the YMCA. Brick after brick. You talked about it. Chris Holman, he's looking to build it brick by brick, and there are teams that sometimes they build your unders brick by brick as well. I absolutely love those. That's Colby Marchio. He does great work over at Your Betting News. He joins me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then in terms of that Arizona versus UConn game that you were alluding to, UConn's right now 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. This is actually going to be a home game for them, not one of those, and air quotes here, neutral court games where they're playing 50 miles away from one campus and the other team is traveling through 3 time zones, which those are ridiculous. We need to just call those home games. That's just me. But that said, with UConn, how do you take a look at them after they got the job done outright against BYU, but it got a little bit hairy late? And this is an Arizona squad that already has a big win on their resume against Florida.
Big East bias aside, I took UConn -4.5 when it opened. I just think Arizona's going through a ton of early travel. Like early on, they went a neutral site against Florida, and then they're coming off in a neutral site. It's basically at UCLA. UCLA was a home game. You already alluded to that. And them now going to Stores. This is their first true road game, first true test. And I think the UConn Huskies are going to benefit from that. We know they like to play slow, and we know Arizona likes to speed it up. If UConn can slow it down and play the methodical defense that they love to play, I think points will be at a premium for Arizona. And you get them out of their comfort zone, I don't think they're going to perform well. And I think this is just a good spot to back the Huskies, even though they're coming off a close call against BYU. I'm also just a sucker for Dan Hurley. I know a lot of people don't like him. I'm a sucker for a lunatic. And I just know that Stores is going to be bumping. It's going to be a madhouse at the Pavilion.
Well, he certainly is a lunatic, but he is a very, very good guy in terms of what he does while being a lunatic. So there's that aspect of things. And I think that this is going to be a fun one. And with UConn, as we know, a little bit more of a defense-oriented team, Arizona's really looking to push tempo. And in a game like this, would you say that it's maybe a little bit correlated where if you like the over, maybe you like Arizona a little bit more, and if you like the under, that probably bodes a little bit better for UConn?
100%. It is definitely one of those spots. And if Arizona does what Purdue did in Tuscaloosa, I think the over soars over. If you make UConn speed up, which is something I think they can do. UConn is the type of team where I like them in the tournament because I don't like fast teams and I don't like slow teams in the tournament. I need a team that could do both because you have to in the tournament. You have to adapt. And if you force UConn to speed up, I don't think they win in this in this spot early on, but I think the over will soar over if Arizona forces tempo.
Absolutely, and I think that those are always big things to be taking a look at here in the early goings of the season as well. And have there been just a few teams in general that you've been impressed by to begin the season? Obviously, I don't think that DePaul is one of them after they've lost at home to Buffalo. Sorry, I had to throw that in there, but that said, have there been a few teams that you've been taking a little bit of a liking to, and maybe you've bet them a few times and they've been able to come through for you?
I'll name 3 teams. I already named Purdue. That was one of them. I'll get that out of the way. Just what they did in Tuscaloosa, I want to see them do it one more time, and then maybe I'll bet on it. Or maybe if I watch a game with them and they lose, and I'm like, this was on a neutral site court, they would have won 9 times out of 10. That's what I did with UConn a couple years ago when they lost at Allen Fieldhouse. I'm like, this is the best team in the country. I don't care that they lost. The other one is Gonzaga. I want to see what they do on Monday against Alabama. And if they play very well, or if they lose close, just like the UConn I just alluded to, I'll probably be on Gonzaga to win the whole thing. System play, even though it lost, our good friend Ross Hodge, Greg, I know you're a sucker for an under.
Yes.
I am as well. Ross Hodge at West Virginia is an under machine. It only went over because they were up 15 and getting fouled. It made no sense. This under should have happened again. Should have been 5 straight unders for Ross Hodge and the West Virginia Mountaineers. Keep an eye on that team. The books have yet to adjust for him. The unders are soaring, and I think that's going to be a cash cow this season. Also, the greatest under of all time, Greg. I don't know if you remember this, but the North Texas-Wisconsin game in the NIT, greatest under of all time.
Oh, yes. I remember I did a write-up back when I was over at DraftKings for that, and that was a game where I wrote up the under for it. I thought, man, this thing is dead. And then Wisconsin scored 0 points in the final 8 minutes. I remember I did a beer review for an 8% alcohol by volume after that in honor of Wisconsin scoring 0 points in the final 8 minutes to give my ode to that. So that was one that was so glorious. So I do remember that. And with that North Texas style, always very slow and very controlled. And how much do you have to adjust for some of these teams that are a little bit different? Because North Texas, even without Ross Hodge, they've been a relatively solid team in terms of the under. Oh, yes, they bring in Daniel Robinson, who he was over at Cleveland State, and maybe they're going to be a skoge a bit faster, but we saw what happened over at St. Mary's a few days ago. They didn't do their part because they scored less than 50 points in that game for the over. And when it comes to some of these teams with coaching changes, I think that it's really intriguing to take a look at them because a lot of these coaches, they stay true to their guns, even someone coming up from the D2 ranks, like we're seeing it over at IU Indy, for example, with that.
Oh my God. Yeah,
system. Wow.
Zooming. That's a team of Lamborghinis.
And
they're still bad, but they're running at 100 miles an hour.
Oh, and they're much better than they were a season ago. They might still be bad, but at the very least, they're playing some respectable basketball. And how much can you find some value on these teams that maybe they have a persona of, like, for example, Iowa playing up tempo, and a guy like Ben McCollum comes in and he completely changes things around?
Know that you and I would love to go sit at a IU Indy Panthers game at the Jungle.
Yes.
But yeah, I've been looking at more of, I mean, it's so hard to memorize all these kids' names. There's 365 teams. So it's easier to remember coaching styles and like looking up how they play in terms of like you can get maybe good value on a total. I'm a sucker for unders. I love unders. I think it's the most exciting thing. And the people that don't like college basketball is because they're not betting enough unders because they're out there every single day and they're electrifying. I mean, we talked about North Texas and West Virginia. I don't think they've caught up to their totals yet. I mean, West Virginia has been near the 140s almost every game they've played so far, and I think that's astronomically high. You mentioned North Texas against St. Mary's. I mean, the under still went under there. I bet that. And they're still playing slow. They still play good defense. Maybe they're not as good as they were with Ross over the last couple of years, but it's still a slow tempo team that plays very well defensively. And if they're not going to catch up with them, I'm going to keep circling them on my week-to-week app to keep up with when the odds come out. But I think they play Central Arkansas on Thursday. I'm definitely going to be looking at the under there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that these are always a lot of fun to be taking a look at. And is there anything else with regards to the board for Wednesday that is catching your eye? Because we talked about the two big games in Arizona, UConn, along with Alabama versus Illinois. But I know that there are some team totals that you've been playing quite a bit of this year. You've got a few system plays. Anything else that's really standing out to you?
As of right now, no. But Thursday, Central Arkansas, North Texas under is going to be the play. And probably I'll take the Rider team total under against Houston.
Oh, that Rider team is brutal.
It's probably going to be 48.5, and I just want to sweat that out. And then I have USC Troy circled because every game Troy has played in has been a road game. So I'll probably look and see if I can take USC.
Yeah, with that Troy team as well, they lost a lot with Tater Conaway going on over to Indiana as well. And I think that you just alluded to it with this Rider team. How much you just want to be fading some of these bad teams towards the early part of the season? Like UMass Lowell has been, terrible.
I mean, Greg, listen to this. They played LMU and then CSN, and then Thursday they play at USC. So it's going to be 4 straight road games on the West Coast.
Oh, that is brutal. Like, I remember when Chattanooga had that back-to-back against St. Mary's and UNLV. That was such a great fade spot on them. And how much do you have a few of those teams circled as well? Because I do think that scheduling spots are really important in college basketball.
Yes.
We're going to be getting those Feast Week tournaments coming up in a week or two as well. And when you've got one team that's playing their second game in 2 days and a team that is fresh, those are always, for my money, really, really good hammer spots on the team that is playing in back-to-backs and fading them.
So here, you'll get a kick out of this. Friday, I have Yale circled because my good friend Doug Gottlieb's coaching the other team that they're facing.
And somehow they nearly knocked off Minnesota. I don't know what form of sorcery they used to stay in that game, but that was something that was very strange.
I'm a sucker for Yale. Nobody talks about how good this Yale team is until the tournament comes around. They're like, hey, Yale team's pretty good. I think they're going to go pretty far. They're always good. They're good right now. Go put some respect on their name. Yeah, they're smart. They're smarter than us. Smarter than me, at least. Greg, you're a genius. Green Bay, I typically, if I do a write-up on a Green Bay game, it'll be a spike bet. My spike bet every year is to fade Green Bay's first game because it's typically against a juggernaut, Kansas. Thank you. I just also cannot stand Doug Gottlieb. So hopefully he's listening.
I do not know how the radio show is. I've never listened to the radio show. It might be great. It might be awful. But if it's anything like the college basketball team, it's probably not very good. So there's that aspect of things.
2 full-time jobs. How you doing it?
Yeah, I don't know. And trust me, I'm someone that grew up 45 minutes away from Green Bay. I was not too happy about the hire. I'm still not too happy. And I take out my spite by making money off of fading UW Green Bay myself. So we are in the same boat there. And Colby, I know you're doing such an excellent job taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. We'll let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
100%. Greg mentioned it earlier. Up your units every single day on Betting News at 12 Eastern on our Twitch, YouTube, and on my Twitter. It goes live on my Twitter. And you can check out all my write-ups at Betting News. I write every single sport for the most part, college-wise. Baseball's right around the corner. I'm just kidding. It's not, but it's literally, I'm going to be thinking about futures pretty soon. But you can follow all my write-ups, all my bets on my Twitter at Colby M. Bets. Everything is always free, always transparent, and always #fun.
Absolutely. And Colby is doing such an excellent job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, learns such great insights. So big thanks, Colby, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. Your lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Colby Marchio. He does great work over at Your Betting News. He does a tremendous job out there in the great state of Illinois, holding it down. And I know he joined me a lot on the baseball podcast. It was great to be able to get him on the college basketball podcast today. A big thanks to Colby for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81. We are going to be going in Las Vegas Station, or this is where we go with the big games involving the larger conferences first, and then the teams from smaller conferences. This includes the SWAC, the MEAC, the Atlantic Sun, the Southland Conference, the Northeast Conference, the Big South. If I haven't said the Atlantic Sun, I feel like sometimes I say these conferences like 5 different times. The Patriot League, those are going to be the games listed at the bottom. So how about if we do get things started with 663, 664 on the card. It is Middle Tennessee, and they're going to be on the road against Michigan. Michigan is a 24.5 point favorite. Tallest game is 153.5, and I did set a 160.5 total. I'm going to be in on the over. For Middle Tennessee, we just don't have too much of a sample size for them against Division I opponents. We have seen them against plenty of non-D1 teams, but for Middle Tennessee, they go out there, they get a win in their first game against a D1 foe, Evansville, 77-72, and it doesn't seem like Middle Tennessee is going to be super fast. They're probably not going to be super slow. They're right now averaging 95 points per game, but then again, you play against two non-Division I teams, and that very much skews the numbers. They bring back Kamari Lance from a season ago, guy that was a former top 100 recruit. He came out of high school a year early. I think that was a mistake, but thus far he's looked very rock solid. He's averaging over 17 points per game, 4 boards. It's never really been a great 3-point shooter, and for Middle Tennessee, the lifeblood of this team typically is generating turnovers, being able to have just defensive tenacity, but I do think that they might be looking a little bit more to the outside with getting back Alec Oglesby, who's dealt with injuries over the last few seasons, a career about 38% 3-point shooter. They just, like they have over the last few years, haven't had a lot of size. Like, aside from the 1 year that they had Issa Mustafa, you don't have done down low Chris Lufay. He's a guy that's saying 6'11". They're going to be looking to him a little bit more, but Michigan should just absolutely dump truck this team down low. 7'3" a day Mara, way that he's come out this year, give the team 12 points and rebounds per game, as everyone thought that Yaxel Lendeborg was going to be the main attraction, and he probably will be when it's all said and done, but Mara's actually put up better numbers right now. Lendeborg, he's still been solid, 11.5 points, 6 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, but with Michigan, the big issue for them last year was turnovers, and they are still turning the ball over about 15.5 times per contest. They're going to need to cut down on that, but I did like the fact that they brought in Elliot Kadu in the offseason. He should be able to give this team a little bit more direction than they had in the past. You bring back someone like an Amari Burnett from a year ago. He's able to give you some nice scoring. Roddy Gale is able to give you about 10 points per contest, and Morris Johnson has been rock solid down low. I think that this Michigan team is going to be able to win from within, but I do think that Middle Tennessee has just enough backcourt play to hold in there, and we are seeing Michigan be a little bit sloppy with the ball, and despite Michigan being sloppy with the ball, they're still averaging 90 plus points per contest and playing very up-tempo. So I did set a total here of a 160.5. I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to take anything of 23 plus here with Middle Tennessee. 665, 666 on the card. It is Harvard, and the smart kids are on the road against Penn State. Penn State is a favorite of 12 to 12.5 points. So last game, it is 142.5, and when it comes to Penn State, I can only set them as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Harvard. With Harvard, they had a little bit of a less than savory first half against New Hampshire. Honestly, they were very lucky not to lose that game, but they bring back pretty much 3 out of their top 4 scorers from the season ago. You bring back a guy in Chandler Piggy who's able to do a bit of everything, 15 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists. Robert Inton, he's hitting it hard, going back to last year, career about 14-point per game scorer, mid-30s 3-point shooter, and then you got 6'7" Thomas Beatty II, who's been able to do a nice job, give this team about 4.5 or so rebounds per game in his 2 years on campus. He's able to shoot in the high 30s from 3-point range as well, so we got good versatility there. Harvard typically outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. Not necessarily a team that's going to be looking to gun it. They've had a tough time on the offensive glass, but they also do a nice job in terms of winning the turnover battle. And with this Harvard team, they've really been able to limit 3-point shooting opportunities. And for Penn State, this is a backcourt that's in total transition right now. You lose 4 of your top 5 scorers from a season ago. Freddie De Leon, he's that top scorer that returns. He's right now giving the team 12 points per contest. Now, the freshman Cookman and Malai Tunka along Caden Mingo. These two guys have both been able to give you about 15 to 15.5 points per contest, but for a Penn State team that's always been based around generating turnovers, their main forte is actually taking care of the ball right now. They've only turned the ball over about 7.3 times per game. That is one of the top marks in all of college basketball. A little bit of that is a byproduct of the fact that they are playing against teams that they really don't force any turnovers whatsoever, like a LaSalle, New Haven, Fairfield. These are not teams that are going to put any sort of defensive pressure on you whatsoever, and this is a Penn State team that just doesn't have a ton down low. You do have a 7-footer, Ivan Drsic, who comes over from Croatia. He's averaging fewer than 3 rebounds per game, and he's like the lone guy in the rotation that's seeing meaningful minutes that's really giving you more than 4 points per contest. So I do think that that's something to be taking note of. I do think that Harvard is going to be able to do a pretty rock-solid job on the glass. Their main kryptonite has been not grabbing offensive rebounds, so I do think that as a result, Harvard is going to be able to do a nice job holding in this game. I did semi-total here at a 154. Like, with Penn State, this is typically a team that's in the top 100 with regards to total possessions per game. And I do think that this Harvard team, even though they've been pretty rock solid on defense thus far, it's been a byproduct of playing against lesser competition. This is a Harvard team that I think is going to be pretty efficient with regards to their offense right now. We're currently about 185th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, going against a Penn State team that's not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. So I like this over, and I do like the points here with Harvard. 667, 668 on the card. It is Jacksonville State, and they're going to be playing us to South Alabama. South Alabama is an underdog of 3 to 3.5 points. Right now, the total is 136.5, and I did set a total of 134.5. I like the under. South Alabama last year was outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and they play one of the more ridiculous styles that you're ever going to see. They had opponents taking over 59% of their field goal attempts from three-point range last season, by far the highest mark I have ever seen in college basketball, and now they face off against a Jacksonville State team that they've been shooting about 36.5% from three-point range as far this season, but it's a very small sample size. They played against two non-Division I teams, so it's hard to make too much out of that. The lone game that they played against a Division I team, that was against Coastal Carolina. That was a 74-67 win, and in that game for Jacksonville State, they shot more like 8 of 21 from three-point range. I like the fact that they brought in Mustafa El Montequil. He was a really good do-it-all player over at Louisiana last year that supplied that team with 14.5 points, 5 boards, steal and a half per contest, but really not much of a guy that's going to give you pop from three, and that's where I think that the loss of Jerome Pierre, who is giving you 21 points per contest, is really going to be showing up. But I also did like the fact that they brought in Jamar Franklin. He's someone that actually played at South Alabama a few seasons ago last year for this Jacksonville State team. 10.5 points per contest. He was shooting about 40% from three-point range, and then A.C. Bryant should be able to give you some rough and tumble after being over at Alabama A&M as a 14-point scorer 8 seasons ago. So Jacksonville State, they do have some nice three-point shooters, but with South Alabama, the reason why they have you take so many threes is that they're good at generating turnovers. Last year, a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they face off against a Jacksonville State team that they both did a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball last year, and they were also in the bottom 5 in terms of fewest turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So you've got sort of dueling styles. As a result, I did set my line at 2.5. I do think that South Alabama is going to be able to hold in there. They've gotten the job done in all their games as far as the season, but some of them have been a little bit more harebrained, and they are going back to the guys that have been so successful at the D2 ranks, coming up to the Division I level. They've done that with Peyton Law, give you 15 points, 7 rebounds per game. Adam Olson is another one of those D2 All-Stars, 15 points per game out of him thus far this season, and that's led to someone like a J.J. Wheat, who was rock solid for the team 8 seasons ago, being in more of a reserve role. You've got Randy Brady, who's been around the block a little bit. He's right now give the team about 6 points per contest, and he's a career about 38% three-point shooter. South Alabama does have some guys that are able to bomb it from three-point range on this team, but also doing a nice job despite the fact that they generate a lot of turnovers of not putting you on the free throw line. Right now, a top 5 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per game basis. They're really doing a good job as well of being able to take care of the ball themselves. 9.5 turnovers per game. I think they get a slow and controlled game. Both of these teams outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game 8 seasons ago. So did set my total 134.5, and it's sort of strength on strength. You've got a pair of teams that are doing a solid job of being able to shoot it from 3, but I do think that in the end, South Alabama finds a way to hold in there. That 61.2% free throw shooting percentage is a little bit of a concern for them outright, so I set them as a slight dog of 2.5 points. I'm going to be be one take 3+ here with South Alabama, and I'm in on the under. 669, 670 on the card. Cleveland State plays us at Valparaiso. Valparaiso is a underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. Total is right now at 159 and a semi-total at a 152. I'm going to be in on the under. Now, Cleveland State is playing at a harebrained and ridiculous style. You bring in Rob Summers in the offseason. He was coaching over at Missouri State last season under Dennis Gates. As we know, Dennis Gates, he was the Cleveland State coach at one point a few seasons ago. And for Cleveland State, they have been well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and very much are cranking up the tempo, 52nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You got a Valparaiso team, though, that has left something to be desired on offense, and currently they are 284th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So you've got sort of dueling styles there. For Valparaiso, you've had Rakeem Chaney come in. He's been able to do a nice job as a freshman, good in the team, 17+ points per contest. Lone guy in the roster that's giving you over 9 points per game. They lose all right from a season ago, and yes, that's his actual name, and they need Isaiah Barnes to step up. Barnes was a rock-solid player over at Tulsa over the last few seasons, began his career over at Michigan as a starter for Tulsa, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest. I mean, those are good numbers, and he stepped in this season, and he's had a combined 18 points in 4 games, so you have to wonder when he's going to be able to wake up a little bit more. They do bring in O&Ds, about an 8 to 9 point per game score from Texas A&M Corpus Christi from season ago, and for Cleveland State, it's very clear that this team is going to be gambling for turnovers. A lot of those gambles have not paid off, and they've only been able to generate about 11 turnovers per game as a result, while they themselves haven't turned the ball over about 15.5 times per contest. I did, though, set them as an 8-point favorite because with Valparaiso, you don't necessarily have a ton down low, and this has been a Cleveland State team that has been able to do a good job in terms of having a positive rebound differential, and additionally, you've got Josiah Harris, so I think he can absolutely take over this game. He was over at Akron last season, got injured after 6 games, but he was a starter for them. I was averaging 8.5 points, 5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Saw some starts 2 seasons ago over at West Virginia. I do think that as things go along, Cleveland State is going to be able to lock in a little bit more, and they're going to be able to cut down on these turnovers with bringing in someone like an Ice Emery from Western Carolina and Dion Nasai, who he began his career over at George Washington, was not able to see a whole bunch of minutes for them last season, but is a guy that's a career 40% three-point shooter. He's right now supplying the team with 18 points per contest, albeit in a small sample size, but for the Beacons of Valparaiso, also a unit that they've been able to generate a few turnovers thus far this season, but they've also been having a difficult time in terms of being able to take advantage of open looks down low outside the top 320 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that helps out Cleveland State in this spot. I do think that Cleveland State makes this a little bit of a sloppier game. Set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay with Cleveland State, and I'm in on this total under as well, as I did set my total at a 152. 671, 672 on the card. Bowling Green plays us, so William & Mary, America's favorite tag team, as you don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both, and you also get 7 points if you take a shot on them, and your total on this game is 164, and I set Bowling Green as a 6.5 point favorite, so I, at 7+, I'm going to be in on America's favorite tag team. As for William and Mary, there's nobody named William or Mary on the team, but that said, you do have a Reese Miller, who's been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest, and this is a William and Mary team that, in this cultural style, they're looking to bomb from 3. They, last year, were a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that came from 3-point range. Pretty much, they want everyone out there on the floor being able to pop it from 3. That includes their 6'8" big man, and Tunde Valdvasisi, who comes over from LaSalle, where last season he was pretty solid for them, giving that team about 6 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. They do lose quite a few guys from a season ago, so Kyle Pulliam, one of the main returners, needs to really be able to step up. He's been able to give the team 12 points per contest. They went the Dartmouth route with bringing in Caden Haskins, who last year has a little bit of a 6-man for them, shot in the mid-30s from 3, supplied that team with 9.5 points per game, so going to be interesting to see how all these pieces are able to really work themselves out. Joel Emanuel, who's over at Fairleigh Dickinson, is another one of those guys that comes in, and on the flip side, you've got a Bowling Green team that right now is doing an amazing job at generating turnovers. A top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with bringing back Javante Campbell, who last year he gave the team over 2.5 steals per contest. Right now, 4.8 steals per game. I don't know if that's quite sustainable, but I knew he was averaging 12+ points per contest last season. He's back there this year, and then you bring in Josiah Shackelford. Shackelford has done a nice job coming up from the junior college ranks, supplying the team with 15 points per contest, and that's a lot of what Bowling Green has done under Todd Simon. They've been looking to these guys that were non-Division I guys to be able to help out. But you also bring in a guy like a Javon Ruffin, who came in off the bench, was always a relatively solid scorer over at Colorado. Mayor Wool, he was a part of an Eastern Kentucky team that was good at generating turnovers as well. But this is also a Bowling Green team that, moving forward, I do think that they're going to be leaving a little bit of something to be desired on those possessions where they don't generate turnover. Typically, when you have a team that gambles for turnovers, that leaves you wide open in terms of giving up some threes, and that's exactly what William & Mary's forte is. William & Mary, they themselves have been able to generate about 15 turnovers per game, so it makes it an interesting spot. I do think that you're going to get an up and down game, as Todd Simon, when his teams have been clicking on all cylinders going back to his time over at Southern Utah, they like to play up tempo. Bowling Green right now about 144th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. William & Mary has been 35th in the country. I do think that you get a lot of possessions here, so set a total of 165.5. I do like the over and the points here with William & Mary. 673, 674 on the card. UConn is playing us to Arizona. Arizona is an underdog of 5.5 points on this game. It is 156.5. I'm going to be able to take those points with Arizona. I did set my line at 4 with Arizona. They've already got a very nice neutral court win on their resume against Florida. They were helped out a little bit by the fact that game was played in lovely Las Vegas, but still, neutral court game. They get the job done with Koa Pete looking like one of the most impressive players in all of college basketball right now. 15.5 points, 5.5 boards. I recognize he hasn't quite duplicated that 30-point performance quite yet after that game against Florida, but they haven't needed him to because they've been facing off against a lot of outgun competition. You know that Arizona is going to be one of the better teams in all of college basketball on the boards, with Toby Awaka coming back after he gave the team 7+ rebounds per game a season ago, and I truly do think that less is more with this team, because you lost Caleb Love, who was a guy that could shoot you into a game, but boy, oh boy, that guy could really shoot you out of a game last season, and now you replace him with someone that in Jaden Bradley as a little bit more of a main guy who's able to give you about 12, 13 points per contest. Anthony Del Rosso last season, he was shooting it well at about 41% from three-point range. He sees an elevated role, and you bring back Mateivas Krivas, who was limited due to injury last season. He brings you some really good size. I think that he's going to be a 5+ rebound per game guy himself. And for Connecticut, you've got a lot of guys that are back from a season ago as well. So Ball was shooting over 40% from three. He forms a really good backcourt alongside Demery, who comes on over after he was a nice double-figure scorer over at Georgia. Alex Caravan, he was a part of those 2 national title teams, and he last season was able to shoot it relatively well from three at about 35%, 15.5 points, 6 boards, and he's really building off of that thus far this season. And additionally, I do think that you're going to have Terrace Reed do a rock-solid job down low. Reed has been able to give this team 9 rebounds per game thus far this season. They have some mix-and-match guys like Alec Munder, Dwayne Karama, who are going to be able to give you a blow when you need them to. But, I mean, with Malachi Smith, he needs to take over the reins as the main point guard for this team, as he, along with Demery, have both been really handling the ball. They've went a little bit more to Demery, which is a bit surprising, because when he was over at Dayton, you did have Malachi Smith be a little bit more of that primary facilitator. So we'll see what happens with regards to this UConn backcourt. This is a UConn team that traditionally, they are well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but always a really good team with regards to their offensive efficiency, top 20 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And we know that Arizona, year in and year out, they're a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, and I think that they're going to be even more efficient with their offense than they have been in past seasons. So this is a total that I did set out of 158. I'm going to be taking a shot on the over, and anything above 4, I'm taking those points with Arizona. 675, 676 on the card. Temple, we give our Oda Lane Kiffin go Owls. They are going to be playing us to Hofstra. Hofstra is an underdog of 5 points, and total on this game, it is 146, and made a total of 147. I do like the over. For Temple, they're never going to get completely out of sorts with regards to their tempo, the Adam Fisher style, as he is a disciple of Mr. Micah Shrewsbury. He was over there with him at Penn State. It's one where you just rely upon overall efficiency and three-point shooting. Like Temple's right now 262nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Hofstra really dialed it back last season. I think that was just a one-off right now. They're in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. So I do think that they're going to be pushing Temple a little bit more, and that's a big reason why I'm in on the over. I did set my total 147, but with Temple, I did also set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them at a 6.5 or less with Hofstra. I love the fact that you bring back Cruz Davis from his season ago, as he cruised his way to a really nice year. He was able to give that team 14 plus points per contest, shot in the high 30s from 3-point range, and last season, this was actually a Hofstra team that was number 1 in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting shooting percentage, but gone are the days of someone like a James Graham down low. You do bring back Silas Sunday, true 7-footer, but he's never really been able to elevate the way that many people are anticipating. They do bring in an Iona transfer in James Patterson, who last season gave that team 9.5 points, 6 boards. It was a small sample size, was limited 15 games due to injury, but I do think that for Temple, they're going to do a nice job in terms of their just positionless basketball style. You really don't have a ton of length out there. Gavin Griffiths, he stands 6'8". He's not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but I do think that Masai Gilliard is really going to be able to elevate this team. He comes over from an end where last year, 11 points, 7.5 boards, shot in the low to mid-30s from three, gave you a steal per contest. He just does a little bit of this and that frees things up for Aaron Tobiasen, who's a Maine returner from a year ago, and Darren Bilford Tuff, who comes on over from Arkansas State to really be able to uplift this offense. For Fort last season, he was able to give that Arkansas State team right around about 8 points, 4 boards. 2 years ago is when he really flourished for Arkansas State, but feels like this system has been playing very well to him. And then you've got Mohamed Quito, who just has not seen the floor whatsoever for this team. He was an upside guy that was over at St. John's. He was over at Tulsa. Has just never really been able to find minutes anywhere whatsoever. Looks like that's going to be the case for him once again this season. But I think that having Jordan Mason giving out 4 assists per contest, being Mr. Versatile over at UIC last year, he gave that team 9.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. That'll be just enough for Temple to be able to get the job done. And Temple is doing a nice job of being efficient. 6.3 turnovers per game, the fewest in all of college basketball right now. They, despite not having a ton of size, have been able to grab a lot of second and third chances as well. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game that Hofstra finds a way to pull out with late game felling. I set my total at 147, so like this 146 over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Owls. 677, 678 on the card. Villanova hits the road, and they're facing off against LaSalle, and LaSalle is exploring a cover as an 11.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 142.5, and I'm willing to take a shot on LaSalle. I did set them as a 6.5 point underdog for LaSalle. I do think that they're going to be very much a defense-oriented team this season under Darius Nichols. He last season had his Radford team playing outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game, though they've been able to get some good production thus far out of Jaden Marshall, who came over from Niagara in the offseason last year. Niagara, 10 points per contest, shot in the high 30s from three-point range. Does a good job in terms of fitting this system. And then you've got a big man in Justin Archer, who last we saw him over with Darius Nichols 2 seasons ago over at Radford. He was pulling in their 7+ rebounds per game, more like 5 boards per contest this season, and it is a bunch in LaSalle that has had a little bit of a tough time with the turnovers, about 13 turnovers per contest, but still, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to win that rebound battle, as they're not allowing opponents to get a lot of second and third chances. And I do think Rob Dockery is giving you quite a bit of something as well. Began his career over at Texas A&M, where just was unable to see any minutes whatsoever a season ago. And on the other end, you've got a Villanova team that is very much new look under Kevin Willard, who just really didn't bring over any of his guys from Maryland. He brought in like one big man that did not see the floor whatsoever, along Tefera Gapere, who has seen almost no minutes whatsoever. It's been all about Duke Brandon down low. Has been able to give you 15 rebounds per game. Nobody else has given you more than 4.5 boards per contest. And Bryce Lindsey. Lindsey has been in takeover mode. He's been able to give the team 23 points. Last year over at James Madison was a 40% three-point shooter. Right now shooting 50% from three-point range. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a mainstay. And Villanova has been playing a little bit more of a, shall we say, slower brand of basketball than we saw with the Maryland bunch from a season ago. That Crab 5 team that Kevin Willard had was by far his best offensive team, and typically when he was over at Maryland, along with Seton Hall, his teams played a little bit more slowly, and right now we're seeing Villanova at 258th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that's where they're going to settle for the season, and LaSalle, they themselves are about 281st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so do think that you get a little bit of a lower scoring game. It is a Villanova team that I think is going to cool off a little bit with Bryce Lindsey, and the rest of the team has not necessarily shot it too impressively from three-point range. They've been solid in terms of generating a few turnovers, so I do think that this is going to be a slow, more controlled game. Villanova should be able to win the battle on the glass, but I think that LaSalle holds in there, and I do think that this game is close enough for late game felling. I did set my total 144.5, so you're at the 142.5 or so. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over and the points with LaSalle. 679, 680 on the card. Indiana State plays those at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is a 1.5 to a 2-point underdog. Total this game, it is 146, and with Indiana State, I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number with Louisiana Tech. They're always a very good team with regards to their interior defense. We saw that last few seasons when they had the Bacho man, Daniel Bacho, and they're looking to turn over a little bit of a new leaf this season with Kylan Hause coming in as a 6'10" big man, give the team 7 boards per contest, but it's really been a lot of rebounding by committee. Avery Thomas and Kaden Cooper, their main 2 scorers, are both giving you about 6.3 rebounds per game. AJ Bates, he's been able to come in and help out the backcourt as well with about 10 points. He's become that main facilitator after last season. You had Mr. Newman be able to give you about 7.5 assists per contest. With Bates, he was really lost in the shadow of Newman and everything that he was able to do, and he's done a good job on that front. And you do bring in Scooter Williams Jr., who was over in the Southland last season. He's been a nice ancillary scorer as well, but on the other end, you do have an Indiana State team that it does feel like they're starting to find their bearings a little bit more in terms of taking care of the ball. Last year, they were well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis. You do bring back some of those guys like a Camp Wagner from the season ago. He's been able to give you 10 points, down a little bit with his three-point shooting, as Indiana State right now is shooting just 27% from three-point. I do think that they're going to experience some positivity with that three-point shooting. You bring back Marcus Harding from the season ago, 6'10" big man that last year 6.5 points in the mid-30s with regards to his three-point shooting, 4 boards per contest, and Sterling Young was, in my opinion, the main guy that they brought over. He was over at Florida A&M last year where he was a 6th man that came in off the bench, gave the team 17 points, really flowed that offense quite well, and then you add in there Ian Scott, who's been able to give you 14 points, 8 boards, and I do think that Indiana State finds a way to get the job done against a Louisiana Tech team that's in transition down low. It's a Louisiana Tech team that they themselves, even though they've got Bates doing a really good job in terms of running the offense and giving out assists, they've been turning the ball over 13 times per game as well, and they've been shooting less than 30% from 3, so makes it very interesting with regards to total. I did some out at 154.5. You've got an Indiana State team that's very much looking to run. Last year they were in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Louisiana Tech typically a little bit more slow and controlled. Right now they're about 324th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Last year they were a skoge a bit higher, but not too much higher. But I do think that both of these teams going to be able to get online with their outside shooting, and I do think that this game is going to come down to some late fouls. So I like the over, and I do like Indiana State laying the small number. 681, 682 on the card. VMI is on the road against Richmond. The itsy bitsy Spiders are a not so itsy bitsy favorite of 12.5 to 13.5 points. 153.5 is the total, and for VMI, I made them an underdog of 9.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Richmond has just really had their struggles down low. This is a bunch that is not getting any sort of blocks whatsoever. Last year they were outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of opponent shots that they blocked. 359th this season, and you've got a Richmond team that's shooting just 27.8% from three-point range. Richmond, typically a very slow and controlled team. Last year back outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and right now they're clocking in 101st in the country, but that's in a very, very small sample size. They played a game or two against a non-Division I team that did not count towards that, and on the other end, you've got a VMI team that they're not going to play like super warp speed. They're not going to be super slow. Right now, about 130th in terms of total possessions per game, and VMI was outside the top 250 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis a year ago, and I do think they're bringing back many of their pieces from last year, including your main guy in TJ Johnson, who's right now giving you 25 points per contest. Should be able to uplift that a little bit. Lonas Holstrom, he's been with the program. He's been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest. Now, they did lose one of their main guys in Augustinus Kaldualis from a season ago, so that hurts them. But Tane Yidzaglu, who was that main facilitator with about 4 assists per contest last season, he returns for another year, comes over from the country of Turkey. The ancillary pieces like AJ Clark, Cal Linson, these have been guys who have been around the block a little bit as well. And VMI, it does feel like it's doing a little bit better job on glass. Year in and year out, typically they get decimated on the glass. Right now, they're about a even up team with regards to rebounding, which that's going to help them out against a Richmond team that just is not doing a good job down low. And for VMI, they're allowing opponents to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. Right now, they've really been able to improve that perimeter defense. While for Richmond, you do have a 6'9" big man down low, Jonathan Beagle, who has a little bit of facilitation, 12 points, 6 boards. Last year gave the team about 2 assists per game. But outside of him, it's a lot of positionless basketball with a lot of guys that they don't necessarily shoot it great from 3. Mikkel Tyne has been in the program for a little bit of time. He was able to give the team about 9 points per contest here in the first few games of the season. AJ Lopez, his career about 37% three-point shooter, comes over from Maine, but that's a big step up for him. They've actually been looking to the freshman in Aiden Bright, who's been their top scorer with about 13 points per game, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but They've had a lot of turnover with this team. They don't necessarily have a ton down low. They are still searching for that main facilitator to help out Will Johnson in the backcourt, who he was over at Loyola Marymount. UT Rio Grande Valley has always been about a 3 assists per game guy, but needs guys around him to be able to create, and I just don't think that they have that. I think that this game just really stalls out. I said my total at 143.5. I like the under and the points here with VMI. 683, 684 on the card. Youngstown St is on the road against Toledo. Toledo finds themselves as a very slim 1-point favorite. I'm seeing a pick 'em out there as well. Total is 163. I did set my total 160. I like the under. For Youngstown St, this is a team that's looking to run. They were last season in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, but they're also a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that takes a little bit of a step back with Gabe Dines, who is a true 7-footer that was giving the team over 3 blocks per contest, leaving for USC, but still, you've got a team that's been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of giving themselves a few second and third chances. They've got some improved 3-point shooting with Chris Carroll back from a season ago. He's been able to give this team 14 points per contest, and you've had Jason Nelson be in the program for another year as well. He's not necessarily going to completely explode with regards to anything in general, but he's just a guy that'll give you 8 or 9 points, 2 assists, a steal. So he just does a lot of this and that, for lack of a better term. And then Bryson Dawkins is a guy that they're banking on to improve upon what he's done here in the early part of the season. Last year over at Houston Christian, gave that team 14 points, 5 boards, a steal per contest. So he's a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. And on the flip side, you do have a Toledo bunch that they did lose quite a bit from a season ago, but they retained one of those main guys in Sonny Wilson, 16.5 points on 36% 3-point shooting. Toledo's always looking to run. They're always a team in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Last year, well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and there's no reason to believe that this is going to be an amazing defense this year, but they've been able to generate a few more turnovers this season with the crop of new guys that they brought in. They've been able to get some good production out of Leroy Blyden Jr., who's come in. He's been able to give the team 14.6 assists as a really nice main ball handler for the team. Comes in from the great state of Michigan. Sean Craig, who was over at IU Indy last season. For that bunch, he was able to generate for them a steal, 12 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3 as a 6'7", little bit of a do-it-all player that began his career at the Division II ranks. They've been able to do a nice job, and they do have now a true big man in Austin Parks. Began his career over at Ohio State at 6'10", just didn't see a lot of minutes for them. That should be able to elevate them a little bit. I think Toledo's going to be a little bit more respectable with their defense. Not that they're going to be amazing, but do think that they're going to be a little bit more respectable. And Youngstown State, they themselves over the last few seasons have had their difficulties with regards to their outside shooting and have been a pretty okay defensive team. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under, especially with Youngstown State really slowing down from last year. Right now, about 287th in terms of total possessions per game, set a total of 160. So in on the under, and with Toledo willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 685, 686 on the card. You've got Mount St. Mary's, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Maryland. Maryland, a 19.5 to a 20-point favorite. Total is between 136.5 to 137.5, and I made a total of 141.5. I do like the over with Maryland. They've done a nice job in terms of getting to the free throw line. As a matter of fact, over 30% of their points come from made free throws. That is a top 10 mark in terms of free throw lines in all of college basketball, and sometimes that can be a concern, but for Mount St. Mary's, they are really putting you on the line. As for Mount St. Mary's, they are 328th in the country in terms of fouls committed on a per possession basis, and they've been playing a slow, sort of groggy sort of style as well. They're outside the top 270 in terms of total possessions per game. Maryland's been a mid-tempo team with Buzz Williams coming over and bringing with him a few guys he had from a season ago. Now, Solomon Washington has yet to be able to hit the floor from this team, and you do have a little bit of mixing and matching, like an Elijah Saunders, who was a rock solid player over at San Diego State 2 years ago. Last year was very nice over at Virginia. He's giving you about 10 points, 5 boards per contest. Pharrell Payne has really been that main guy that came on over with Buzz Williams. He's right now giving the team 18 points per game for a Maryland team that I think should see a little bit of positivity with their 30% three-point shooting. David Hewitt has shot over 40% from 3. Keep in mind, a few seasons ago over at Northern Illinois, he was a 20-point per game scorer for them, and then they do have a star freshman in Darius Adams, who I think is going to be solid moving forward as well. With this Maryland team, I did set them at 19.5, so 20 becomes my buy point on a Mount St. Mary's team that they themselves have had their offensive deficiencies while outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I do think that they're going to have some nice facilitation with Xavier Lipscomb, give you over 4 assists per game. He's been in the system for multiple years, and Trey DeVue, who he was over at Western Illinois last last year. Rock solid player that as a part-time starter put in their 9 points, 4.5 boards, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. He should be able to elevate a team that right now shooting about 32% from three-point range. You don't have quite as much size as you've had in past seasons for Mount St. Mary's, which is typically where they made their hay is on the glass, but Justin Mahdi has been around the block over at James Madison, Tulsa, 5+ rebound per game guy, and then bringing in Luke McKeldin, who was over at Santa Clara last year at 6'10". Didn't see a lot of minutes for Santa Clara, but has been able to step in. He's been able to give the team 6 boards per contest. I think that that's just enough for the Mount to hold in there, and do think they get a little bit more scoring with the way that Mount St. Mary's is very aggressive on defense. They're looking to generate a lot of havoc. They don't really cause a lot of turnovers, but they're very physical on the inside, and they'll put you on the free throw line. So this is a total, I said, at a 141.5. I do like the over, and with Mount St. Mary's 20 plus, it's going to be 136 points. 687, 688 on the card. It is Sam Houston State, and they're going to be playing against Wyoming. Wyoming finds themselves as a very, very slim favorite here of 1 to 1.5 points total on this game, between 156.5 to a 157. I did set this line at 1.5 with Sam Houston State being the favorite, so going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. For Sam Houston State last year, the defense was just absolutely dreadful outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they do lose their main guy, Lamar Wilkerson, from a year ago, but you bring back Justin Begg, who's been in the program for a bit of time. He's been able to supply this team with 12 points per game, and then you do have a few other mixers and shakers like Damian Nichols. I believe that this is year number 4 in the program with him. Last year, 8 points, mid-30s, 3-point shooter, po' boy king. He comes on over from NC Central, where he was giving that team 13 points. Not a guy that's going to light you up from 3, but he's able to give you a little bit of facilitation. He's able to do a pretty solid job in terms of elevating a defense that was not so great last season. Then Isaiah Manning was at TCU as a big man that just never really saw minutes for them. He's been able to give this team a little bit more rebounding as well. So I do think that Sam Houston State going to continue to ascend off of that, and they have been giving up a lot of offensive rebounds, but they themselves have been one of the better teams in terms of being able to supply themselves with second and third chances as well. And then on the other end, you do have a Wyoming bunch that they've been able to win their games at elevation thus far this season, but now they'd have to hit the road, and that's going to be a little bit tough for them going down from elevation to sea level, because we always talk about going up to elevation. Same goes when you do go downward as well. They bring in a guy in Caden Bennett, who was a nice double-figure scorer over at Quinnipiac last year. He's been able to pair up with Leland Walker to combine for about 8 assists per game between those two guys. Walker was over at Eastern Kentucky a season ago, and he supplied that team with about 9 points per contest. Wyoming last year outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, because he had Obi Asham or really not much else. Now they're looking to play a little bit more up-tempo in Sundance Wicks' style, but typically with Wicks, his teams, when they play a little bit more up-tempo, they're really looking to get after it. They're looking to be able to pound the boards, and they've been able to do so once again this season. But that said, with this bunch, I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They've got multiple ball handlers, but they also have not necessarily been able to find their quite set rotations yet, and they don't necessarily have as much size down low as you'd expect. Gavin Goris, he's 6'10", comes in from the great state of Wisconsin. He's been able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, but past that, not a lot of size against the Sam Houston State team that is doing a nice job of falling in their second and third chances. I do think that things are going to be a little bit more mid-tempo here with Wyoming doing a nice job shutting down the three-point arc, but they themselves shooting 66% at the free throw line. That could come into play into a nip-and-tuck game, so I do like Sam Houston State on the money line, and with this total, I'm going to be in on this under semi-total at a 149.5. 689, 690 on the card. It is Marquette, and they're going to be playing host to Dayton. Dayton is a mid-size underdog here of 5.5 points, so on this game it's 151.5, and me and Marquette, the 7.5 point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, for Marquette, it's been a little bit of a less than tremendous start to the season. We saw what happened to them a few weeks ago when they just got completely blowtorched by Indiana. But that's it for this Marquette team. I do think that with this team having spent so much time together, they bring in nobody via the transfer portal, that's going to look them against a Dayton squad that, I mean, they do have some mixing and matching going on there. You do bring back a few guys like Latang. Amari Latang has been able to give you about 15 points per contest thus far. And Dayton last year was an amazing three-point shooting team. They were a top 15 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They're better than the 28.4% three-point shooting that we're seeing right now, but they've actually really generated a lot of turnovers. They're generating about 17 turnovers per game. That with having Jordan Durcock, who comes over from Merrimack, doing a nice job in terms of helping out with that. You're bringing in Deshaun Montgomery, who he was injury-riddled last season over at Georgia 2 years ago at Mount St. Mary's, 13 points, nearly a steal and a half on 40% three-point shooting. He does a nice job there, but For Dayton, you just don't have quite as much down low as you did a season ago. Letang does stand 7'1", but outside of him, you don't necessarily have that Zedke, who's a little bit more of a clogger, as Letang actually has the versatility at 7'1" to be able to pop it and lock it from three. You bring in Keontae Jones from CSUN, who has about a 6'7" wing player, is able to shoot in the mid-30s from three, but I do think that Marquette is going to be able to do a solid job in terms of being able to guard the arc. They themselves, a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and you've got a Marquette team that's looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. Dayton, year in and year out, ranks outside the top 270 in terms of their total possessions per game. Right now, they're checking in more on 237th. I think that goes a little bit southward, so did set a total of 147.5. Think that you get a lot of turnovers in a sloppier game, and that favors Marquette. I'm willing to lay it with the Golden Eagles, and I'm going to be in on the under. 691, 692 on the card. South Florida's on the road against Oklahoma State. Cowboys find themselves as a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite. Totals between 177.5 and a 179.5. Did set a total of 174.5. I'm in on the under. South Florida is just playing at absolute warp speed right now under Brian Hodgson, who his team last year over at Arkansas State was actually a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And right now for South Florida, it's been hit or miss with regards to defense, to say the least. They gave up the 50 spot to Cobb State, but they've also given up now over 80 points in 2 out of their last 3 games. But you do have Joshua Omajafo, who's come over from Robert Morris, and he's been incredible for them. Darn near 20 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, and it is a South Florida team that they're generating all these points, over 100 points per contest, despite shooting just 30.3% from 3-point range. Joseph Pignon, it took him a little bit of time to get going. He was finally able to have that big breakout game a few days ago when they got into that game against Kennesaw State, and he got the job done there. Isaiah Nelson has been able to do a nice job providing a double-double, 15.5 points, 7 boards. He did follow Hodgson on from Arkansas State to South Florida, and for Oklahoma State, it's been a little bit touch and go for them. They had a really nice win against Texas A&M, and they are coming off of a relatively solid win as well against Corpus Christi, but that said, this is a unit that still leaves something to be desired offensively. They're outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as you've got a lot of guys that are just looking to find their role. Jalen Curry and Anthony Roy have dealt with a little bit of injury to begin the season, though. Roy made a season debut against Texas A&M Corpus Christi, 15 points in that game after he over at UW Green Bay last year was averaging 25 points per contest. Just absolutely insane what we saw there. Victorious Miller, he comes over from LSU. He's been your head of the sink right now, 19 points, 2.5 assists on over 40% 3-point shooting, and I do think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with Nelson down low. You've got Andre Vucevic, who he comes over from the country of Serbia. He gives you a little bit of size at 6'10", but he hasn't necessarily been too much of a rebounder. That's been more Parsef Allah, the transfer that comes over from Oregon State, who's been able to give the team about 7 boards per contest. Really one of the few guys that doesn't shoot it from 3-point range really too much for this Oklahoma State team. Oklahoma State is looking to push a little bit more tempo, as you've got this style with Steve Lutz at the helm that has been seeing his teams pretty much always be in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. South Florida, is going to run it and gun it, but I do think that there's going to be a little bit of sloppiness on both sides. You do have a Oklahoma State team that last year, they were turning the ball over darn near 14 times per contest. Thus far this season, they're still turning the ball over about 14 times per game, but they've been able to do a nice job in terms of grabbing some second and third chances for themselves, and do have a pair of teams that are shooting below 31% from 3. So I set a total here of a 174.5. I think that we've gone just a hair too far. I'm going to be in on the under, and with Oklahoma State, so that was 4.5 point favorite at 5+. Won't take those points with South Florida, 693, 694 on the card. It is CCU. They play us to UMKC. The Kangaroos of UMKC are 24.5 point dogs. 150.5 is the total, and I said TCU is a 20.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with UMKC. They had that less than savory effort a few nights ago against Iona, where they gave up over 100 points. Turns out Iona might just be pretty good, and they're very much looking to push tempo. As UMKC, it wasn't like the world's greatest effort against Texas, but it was a quality cover. They held Texas to 71 points. That's a little bit more of what you expect out of this team out of Marvin Menzies. It felt like they lost their identity a little bit. They got that back in that game against Texas. You do bring back a pair of guys in Kashim Grady and Jason Petty from the backcourt from a season ago. Petty has been making other teams petty, as he's been able to give the team 15 points per contest, and UMKC is right now shooting 26.4% from 3-point range. We should see a little bit of positivity there. TCU has been one of the colder teams in all of college basketball from 3 as well, at about 29% from distance. Now, they were a rough 3-point shooting team last year as well. They were outside the top 3 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. I think that they did a solid job in terms of addressing that with bringing in Jaden Pierre, double-figure scorer from Providence from a season ago. Tanner Toolson, he was shooting about 35% from 3-point range over at Utah Valley a season ago as a double-figure scorer, and then got a 40% 3-point shooter in Latarius Louvier, Vicious, who comes over from Oregon State. So that should be uplifting a little bit. That said, they are a little bit, shall we say, weaker down low with Malik Diallo, who is expected to see some very good minutes for the team, going out with an injury. So that means that David Punch is going to need to take it on himself to really be a good low post rim protector for the team. 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. And ever since they lost that game to New Orleans, they've been quite a bit better. They do lose that game to Michigan, but they cover that spread. That was a game where they gave up fewer than 70 points to a Michigan team that's been very rock solid. And other than that New Orleans game where they just absolutely went inferno mode from three, they haven't given up 63 points or fewer. It's a TCU team that I do think that they should see a little bit of a rise with their three-point shooting, but I think the same holds true from UMKC. Even with that, though, I think that this total of 150.5 has went a little bit too far. I think that UMKC is getting back to their slower, more defense-oriented defensive roots, and that said, with TCU on the flip side, you know that Jamie Dixon's teams, they're going to be built on defense as well, and they're a mid-tempo team. So set a total of 146.5, like the under and the points with UMKC, 695, 696 on the card. It is Creighton, and they're going to be playing us to North Dakota. North Dakota is a 24.5 to a 25.5 point underdog. 156.5 to 157.5 is the total, and I said Creighton as a 31 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with North Dakota. They're down to about 250th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're a little bit better on defense, but considering they were 355th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago, that's not great. And where they're really losing with the Hawks of North Dakota State is down low. Right now, they're 331st in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with only 20.5% of their missed shots being an offensive rebound, and they're allowing opponents to shoot 66.4% from within the arc. That is 359th in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. You've got a Creighton team that right now, if you look at the overall offensive numbers, they're outside the top 75 and darn near everything. That's because they had that rough game against Gonzaga to begin the season, and I do think that Gonzaga is actually one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. And I mean, in the other two games, over 80 points against Maryland Eastern Shore, 90 plus against South Dakota, so I think that they get back to that. And you just have much more balance with this Creighton team than in past years. It used to be where Creighton, they were having to probably commit copyright if they want to give themselves a nickname. They would have to be five guys because they played five guys and absolutely nobody else. Now you've been looking to the bench to be able to have Jason Green give you 11 points per contest. You've been able to have a few good minutes off the bench from Isaac Trout. They've had some mixing and matching because I know that Green has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but Jackson McAndrew, as a 6'10" combo player, he's able to give you 9 points, 6 boards, pop it from three-point range. Nick Graves, who comes on over from Charlotte, has been able to give you 11 points, does a nice job flowing the offense, along with the Iowa transfers in Josh Jicks and Owen Freeman, who they're playing well off of one another. I do think that this Creighton team is going to be able to own the glass. I do think that they're going to do a nice job in terms of getting online with their three-point shooting. They're right now shooting 28.9% from three. That's a team that I want to be banking on to see some positivity with that against a North Dakota team that always very brutal with their defense. So I did set a total here of a 163. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay with Creighton. 697, 698 on the card. Utah Valley is going to be playing us to UC Irvine. Zot, the Anteaters of UC Irvine are 2 to 2.5 point dogs. 145.5 is the total, and I did set Irvine as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. This is just a Russ Turner we trust sort of play. As for UC Irvine, they did lose quite a bit from a season ago. When you lose the likes of Bryce Tillis, Miles Shea and company, that's a little bit difficult, but they bring back Darren Sarin, who 2 seasons ago was a 10-point per game scorer in the backcourt, just didn't see minutes over at Samford last season. Jerron Dixon is one of the main holdovers from last year. He was a starter that supplied 9 points, mid-30s3-point shooter. Now he's been able to elevate this offense, and you've always got good size with this team. Nez Emakenke, he doesn't necessarily give you a lot of scoring at 6'10", but he's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. You've got Kyle Evans at 6'10", lost in the shadow. Ben Lyken and company a season ago. He's been able to elevate, give the team 5.5 rebounds per game. And you've got a Utah Valley team that they themselves lost pretty much 4 of their top 5 scores from a season ago. Now, they did retain the main point guard, Trayvon Leonard, who last year was only give the team like 6 points per contest, but he was a 5 assists per game guy that when needed, he shot 38% from 3-point. I do like the fact that you've got Jackson Holcomb back right now. He's giving you 17 points per game. And Tyler Hendricks, I know that his brother actually went to the NBA a few seasons ago in the other Hendricks over from Central Florida. I believe Taylor Hendricks. He's been able to come in after he over at Central Florida. In the moments that he got, he was a high 30s 3-point shooter, was a relatively solid player, but just didn't see a lot of minutes. He's been able to give the team 13 points per contest, as well as a Utah Valley team that, contrary to popular belief, they're not necessarily the biggest slug out there in all of college basketball. Right now, they're about 140th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and UC Irvine in recent years have run a little bit more up-tempo. They're in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that Irvine just finds a way to be able to take the fight to Utah Valley and find a way to get the job done. I think that this is going to be very nip and tuck. I think both of these teams are going to play solid defense, but I think you get just enough possessions for an over. So this out a total of 146. I like the over and Irvine on the money line. 699, 700 on the card. Illinois is going to be playing against Alabama. This is from the United Center. So I am technically a neutral court game, but that said, it's in the state of Illinois, and with Alabama, they're right now a 3.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 179.5 to a 181.5. Semi-total 181.5. So I had a 181 or less. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over, but I think Alabama gets the job done. I set them as 1.5 point favorite. I do like them right on the money line. Now, with Tomislav Ivisic, it sounds like there's a good chance that he'll be playing in this game, but how effective he's going to be, that's a little bit TBD. He's been dealing with a little bit of a knee injury, and those are things that you don't want to mess with, especially when you've got a 7'1" big man that pops up from 3-point range. That said, you've had Kylan Boswell do a nice job in terms of elevating his game to being about an 18.5 point per game scorer. You've got Ben Humer-Rickes, who's been able to come in, give the team 11 points per contest after 2 seasons ago. He was a rock-solid scorer over at Evansville, and self-great rebounding with the team. You've got the other Ivisic in Big Z Ivisic, who's been able to slide the team with 6.5 rebounds per game. David Mirosic has come in. He's been able to give the team a double-figure amount of rebounds as well. And for Alabama, you don't have quite as much down low from a season ago with the loss of Grant Nelson, but I think that they're going to do an okay job of holding in there on the glass, and I think the element of versatility with Taylor Bolbowen, who has been tremendous for them. 12.5 points. He's right now shooting 40% from 3 after he shot 40% from distance a season ago. That's big, and you just have so many pieces in this backcourt for Alabama. Houston Mallett along Latrell Wrightsell were both dealing with injuries last season. They're able to give the team double figures. They've been in the system for multiple years. LeBaron Filan has been really filing it away with 19 points, 6 assists, and his 3-point shooting. It's been in the mid-30s, but you're able to get Aiden Holloway back after he missed the first game of the season. He's been supplying the team with 42 points in the first 2 games of the season. I think you get points upon points. These are 2 teams that are turning down for absolutely nobody. Alabama was number 1 in the country in terms of total possessions per game a season ago, and for Alabama, they're once again well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Illinois has been a little bit better with their defense, but Illinois has also had some, shall we say, outmatched competition to say the least, so they did have that game against Texas Tech as well, but that's said, I think that you get a lot of possessions. I think that you get a lot of scoring on both sides. And in the end, I do think that the backcourt of Alabama and having guys that have been in the system for multiple years wins out in the state of Illinois. I said Alabama's 1.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. And at a 181 or less, semi-total 181.5, I'm in on the over. 701, 702 on the card. St. Mary's is playing against Arkansas State. The Red Wolves are an underdog here of 19.5 points. 147.5 to 148 is the total. And I said St. Mary's as a 17.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Wolves. Arkansas State brought in quite a few nice pieces in the offseason via the transfer portal, as you've got Mr. Pannone, a assistant under Nate Oates the last few seasons coming in, and after a rough loss to begin the season, they got absolutely dump trucked by Stephen F. Austin. This team has really been able to rebound. They looked very good in their win against Missouri State, in my opinion, being able to claw that one out at the end. And Chandler Jackson, who comes over from Florida State, he's been very nice for this team with 14.5 points per contest, throwing out 4 assists. It's a team that as a whole, they should see some positivity with their current 27% 3-point shooting, as you've had Jackson shoot it relatively well from 3, but TJ Caldwell has only shot 18% from 3. Sauce Gasol minutes the last few seasons over at Ole Miss when he's been there. He was able to give the team 11 points per contest in the first 4 games of the season. Kyle Heyman was that go-to scorer over at Stephen F. Austin. Should be able to help this team generate a few more turnovers, as for Arkansas State, right now they're generating only about 12.5 turnovers per game. It's still a lot of pieces that are trying to get to know one another, and it's going to be a little bit rough for them down low. Going up against the St. Mary's team that last year was number 1 in all of college basketball with regards to rebound percentage, but Ali Tunkara, he's a true 7-footer that should be able to help this team down low along Chadid Dormiria, and for Tunkara, he comes over after being just a little bit of a project guy over at Lindenwood, and for St. Mary's, no question about it, this is going to be a team that wins that battle down low with Paulius Marsukis. He's able to give you 7+ boards per contest, and for St. Mary's, everyone is going to talk about the defense and the slow style, and they're once again playing very, very slowly. This is a St. Mary's team that's back outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. What Mikey Lewis has been able to do for this team in the backcourt has been incredible. 22 points per game. Last year in conference conference play, he really found his shot. He was a little bit cold to begin the season. In conference play, was shooting over 40% from three. He's currently shooting 57% from three for a unit that as a whole is shooting 44.8% from three-point range. Now, I do think that there's going to be regression with that. Let's call it what it is. That's not going to be able to continue, but that said, this is a team that is much more efficient on offense than we've seen in the past, and that's indicated by the fact that this is currently a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got quite a few guys down low that are going to be able to give you those second and third chances, as well as you've got a guy in Andrew McKeever who's come in. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to give the team a 7-foot frame. He's pulling in there about 9 boards per contest, and then Joshua Dent, another holdover from last season. Really didn't see a lot of playing time last year, but he's part of that Australian pipeline. He's come in, he's been able to give the team 9.5 points per game, but I do think that Arkansas State finds a way to hold in there. Arkansas State is going to be looking to push tempo, and I think that that's going to give a lot of open looks for St. Mary's, but I think that as Arkansas State goes along, that offense is going to get better and better, and I think it's going to be just enough for them to hold in there. Semi-total 151.5. I like the over and the points here with Arkansas State. 703, 704 on the card. Campbell is on the road against Weber State. Weber State is a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and your total is 155.5. So Weber State is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Weber State last year. They were one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Currently, they're in the top 20, but that's a warped number. That's because they played that overtime game against Utah, so that gives you pretty much 5 more minutes of possessions there, and I do think that things are going to be a little bit more tame in their games. Now, they do have great three-point shooting, and that's why I do think that they get the job done here, and they're only shooting about 33% from three, despite the fact that you've got a guy, Nigel Burris, who began his career at Idaho. When he was over at Idaho, he shot over 40% from three, currently shooting 50% from three, but it's a small sample size. You've got Trevor Henning along Jace Whiting, who have been able to combine for 29 points per game. You don't necessarily have quite the amount of rebounding that you've had in the past with this team ever since they lost Dylan Mitchell from a few seasons ago. That's been a little bit of an issue for you, but you do have a 6'9", little bit of a clogger down low, and David Henson, who comes over from the country of Canada. Got a lot of international men in mystery, as you've got Vachimi Vartishin, who's been able to give you 9.5 points, 3 boards, comes over from the country of Finland. And then on the flip side, you've got a Campbell team that is looking to turn over a little bit of a new leaf. Last year, they were outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. They're playing a little bit more quickly under John Endrechuk, who comes over after he was an assistant over at Florida last season, but he retained a few pieces from a season ago, like Tezos Cook, Cam Gregory are back, and Gregory has been one of the main guys last year. Gave the team 7.5 points. He was able to throw in there a pair of assists per contest. Never has been a great three-point shooter at only about 31% from three, but Campbell last year was a top 40 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. You also bring in Davideus Butka, who's been able to give the team 9 rebounds per game. He was over at Pepperdine a season ago, and Chris Fields has been a really nice add. Guy that was over at Norfolk State a season ago, where he saw some solid minutes, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. Not really a versatile guy, but he's going to be a nice little bit of a low post presence as well. I do think that for Campbell, they do an okay job of being able to hold in there, but in the end for Campbell, I do think that with this bunch turning the ball over 15 times per game, having to try to learn this new Endrechuk system, it costs them and makes this game a little bit sloppier. I set my total 145.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Weber State. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 7-5, 7-6, Washington State plays us Southern Utah. Southern Utah, 11.5 point underdogs, 158 to 158.5 is the total, and I did set my line at 15. I'm going to be willing to lay with Washington State. Southern Utah lost by over 60 points a few days ago against Gonzaga, and I think that they stay within 60 in this game, but for Southern Utah, really what they're looking to do is run you off the three-point line. Last year, they were number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of lowest percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that came from three-point range, but they don't have a lot of guys in terms of their backcourt to really be able to hit those shots, as well as they're shooting 25% from three-point range, and they've seen a lot of negative regression from that. Right now, opponents are shooting 43% from three-point range. They don't want you to take threes, because when you do take threes, you oftentimes get a very open look, and they're trying to push things a little bit more down low, because you've got Isaiah Cottrell, a former starter over at West Virginia, former top 150 recruit, who just dealt with a lot of injuries the last 3 seasons over at UNLV. 8.5 points, 5 boards per contest, and then Jaden Faroa has been able to do a really good job in terms of providing versatility from Willie Cross. At 6'8" last season for the Crusaders, he was giving that team 39% three-point shooting, 7.6 boards per contest, and he's actually given them 3 blocks and 6.5 rebounds here in the early going. But in terms of that main facilitator, that's right now a missing element for the team because they're turning the ball over 15.5 times per contest. Now, when you go up against a team like a Gonzaga, that'll do that to you. But for Washington State, even though they're a team that they struggle in terms of holding on to the ball last year outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, they have really been able to iron that out. They're only turned the ball over about 11 times per contest this season with having a nice step up here from Adria Rodriguez, who's not going to give you a lot of scoring, but he's been able to give you 3.5 assists per game and get the ball to some of these guys like Thomas Thredson, who's a holdover from the season ago. He and Emmanuel Ugbo are both shooting over 41% from three-point range, combined for 26 points per contest. And between the two of them, you're getting about 12 rebounds per game. Thredson is a 6'6", little bit of a combo player. Ugbo is a guy that was over at Boise State last season at 6'8", a little bit more of a load of a guy that's able to pop it from three. And then Andy Okafor should be able to give you a little bit more down low as well. He's been able to supply the team with 5 rebounds per game after he began his career at Cal last year. He was in the system and was a nice guy that would come off the bench, give you about 5.5 points per game. Not necessarily a versatile guy, but Washington State has always been a team that's been looking to run under Coach David Riley. Last year, they were in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and in this Rob Jeter system, Southern Utah has not been afraid to run either, and with the way that Southern Utah's three-point shooting defense has just taken a big giant step back, the way that they don't necessarily have, I would say, the world's greatest pieces to be able to match up with the Washington State team that's looking to run and shoot, I think that it's going to be a little bit of a long night for them, as Southern Utah currently 50th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So, made my total 161, like the over on Washington State, made the 15-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number, and now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-563, 306-564. It is Air Force. 8 playoffs to Alabama State. Alabama State, a very slim 1-1.5 point underdog. It's on this game between 140.5 to 141, and I'm going to take Air Force here. I do think that the home court advantage is going to be big. Now, we've already seen Alabama State have a road triumph this season. They went on the road. They got the job done against UAB, but I still am not necessarily the most bullish on this team because they do lose their main guy in the backcourt, and TJ Madlock, that was actually the son of Tony Madlock after just ran out of eligibility. Now, you've got Ashjon Anderson, who's come over from Queens NC, giving the team 17 points, 4.5 assists per game, and Micah Simpson is a holdover from a season ago, where last year, as a little bit more of a sixth man, 6.5 points. He was able to give the team a little bit of good defense off the bench. And for Alabama State, big key for this team last year was the fact that they were a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And we've seen that rise up to over 13 turnovers per game thus far this season. Now, you've got each of your top 5 scorers also generating at least 1 steal per game. But for Air Force, the real issue for this team isn't typically ball security. Now, they're turning the ball over 17.5 times per contest to begin the season. That is not great, to say the least. And they've just got a lot of moving pieces, but typically the issue for this team is the fact that you just don't have too much down low. This is a Air Force team that year in and year out is outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, and you got a 7-footer in Wesley Chalkowski, who last year saw meaningful minutes and he averaged 2 rebounds per game. He's up to 4 rebounds per game this season, so yay, verily there, and you do get back Caleb Walker. He should be a nice cog for the team after last year, 6.5 points per contest. He didn't pop it a lot from 3, but he was able to give you about 3 boards at about 6'9", 6'10", and I do believe that Kyle Marshall is going to need to step up a little bit more than he has to begin the season. Last year, gave the team 7 points, 4 boards. As a part-time starter, threw in there a steal per contest, shot in the mid-30s from 3. Are currently averaging just 3.5 points per game, but the way that Cam Sanders, as a freshman, has been able to give this team 12.5 points per game, that does lead me to believe that Air Force has just enough to get it done against an Alabama State team that's in all sorts of transition with regards to their backcourt, and it is an Alabama State team that, to their credit, they're generating over 14 turnovers per game, so this should be a slow game. Air Force outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game last few seasons, set at 12-138, like the under, and with Air Force not willing to go past the 1.5, I set my line at 2, but going to be willing to lay 1 to 1.5. 306-565, 306-566. Stetson plays host to Howard, and the Bison of Howard are a very slim favorite of 2 to 2.5 points. Still on this game, 149 to 149.5, and set Howard as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them with Howard. I love the fact that they bring back Bryce Harris, who he last year was just limited to about 8 or so games due to injury. 2 seasons ago, when he was out there for a full season, he was able to do a really good job in terms of being able to supply that team with 15 plus points, 7 plus rebounds per game. He just did it all for them. And with Howard, they didn't bring in quite the transfer portal haul that they have in the past, but I like the fact that they bring in Cam Gillis, who was a double-figure scorer over at Lehigh last season, who's been able to help out Harris in the backcourt, give out 5 assists per game. This is a team that's going to be lacking quite a bit of size. Dennis Kalkavias, who comes over from Lithuania, is really the lone guy in the rotation that's north of 6'6". That said, you got a Stetson team that really doesn't have a lot of size down low, and for Stetson, they, under Donnie Jones, have never prioritized defense. They're always outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do bring back one nice go-to scorer from a season ago in Jamie Phillips, who's been able to give you about 15 points, shooting 32% from three. I do expect that to go upward a little bit, but Stetson's always a team that prioritizes their three-point shooting because they get absolutely nothing down low, and they're shooting less than 32% from three-point range. That is a big, giant issue for them. You've got Ethan Copeland, who's been able to do a nice job coming up from the non-D1 ranks. He's been able to give you about 2 assists, 10 points per contest, shooting 37% from three, but Stetson is right now getting just completely bludgeoned on the glass right now. It's a Stetson unit that is also, for a team that's supposed to be good with their shooting, they're shooting 58.8% at the free throw line with not a lot of low post presence. I do think that allows Howard to be able to get the job done against a Stetson team that's not great with their defense. I recognize that Howard is not quite as up-tempo as they have been in past seasons, but I think they get a higher scoring game. Set a total of 156.5. I like the over, and with Howard, I'm willing to lay up duties with them. 306-567, 306-568. Sam Ianford is playing us the Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast does find themselves an underdog of 2.5 to 3.5 points. 159.5 is the total. Set a total of 153. I do like the under for Florida Gulf Coast. Last season, they were well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. I think that them playing a little bit faster this season has been quite a bit of a byproduct of the teams that they've been playing against. They got just absolutely tossed around by Illinois to begin the season. You have to play against Chattanooga. Georgia Southern is a very up-tempo team, so I do think that they're going to be dialing things back from the fact that they currently are a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, and they bring in J.R. Kozinski, who was over at Notre Dame a few seasons ago, and 2 seasons ago at Notre Dame was actually a nice contributor. Now he's been able to give this team 20 points, 8 boards on 40% three-point shooting thus far, and they've needed every bit of it. This team shooting just 30% from three-point range as a collective. You've got Romero Barrio, who's been able to give you a double-figure amount of points, and they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to, get this name, George Washington III. No relation to our nation's first president, but he's been out the last 2 games after he was a transfer over at Michigan and Richmond, never really found his footing at either of those stops. And for Samford, I did set them as a 5-point favorite because it is a little bit of a hampered Florida Gulf Coast team in the backcourt, and down low they should be able to dominate things with Dylan Faulkner, who came on over with Lenny Acuff from Lipscomb, giving you 14 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You've got Norris squared in the backcourt, as well as Keaton Norris and Cade Norris have been able to combine for about 23 points per game, combined for 10 boards, and Keaton Norris has done a nice job blowing out 6.5 assists per game for a bunch in Samford that isn't quite as up-tempo as they were under Bucky McMillan. They never will be quite that up-tempo, but they're doing a nice job taking care of the ball. They're only turning the ball over 9 times per contest, top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. That has led to some good, clean offense, and I do think that with this bunch doing a nice job not allowing second chances, they're a top 30 team in terms of opponents grabbing an offensive rebound after their missed shots. I do think that they find a way to be able to get the job done in a lower scoring game. Semi-line at 5, 1 to lay with Samford, and I do like this total under semi-total 153, 306-569, 306-570. Ohio plays host to Bethune Cookman. Bethune Cookman, an underdog of 6 to 6.5 points, 159 to 159.5 is the total. I said Ohio is a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay with Bethune Cookman. The talent is very undeniable with this team. You bring in a former top 30 recruit in Ontario Morris, who's been able to give this team just a bit of everything, 16 points, 6 boards, 4 assists per game, and then you got the Heedy brothers teaming up with one another as Jacoby Heedy. When he was with this program 2 seasons ago, he was giving the team 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, a steal and a half per contest, and he is right back to those averages this season while being able to provide some relatively good size at 6'6". And then his brother Quentin has come in. He's been able to give you about 12 points per game as well. You've had Ariel Bland come on over from UC Santa Barbara, and I think that he's going to be able to have some bigger moments moving forward. As 2 seasons ago as a starter over at Santa Barbara, he gave that team 6.6 boards, block per contest. He and Daniel Ruzon should be able to do a nice job down low, but for Ohio, after last year, they were outside the top 335 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that that's going to be going northward a little bit with this bunch. They had to play against Louisville, which very much hurts their defensive metrics. St. Mary's is actually one of the best 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Illinois State has been on a 3-point shooting team. Arkansas State is up-tempo, so their bad metrics being well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving it up from 3. I think that it's a byproduct of the teams that they're playing against, and this is a team that has a really good backcourt. Dior Connors was over at Appalachian State last season, a very good defensive team, and he shot 40% from 3 for them. Jackson Paveleski. He was the main point guard a year ago, and he's back to his old tricks. 20.5 points, 4 assists, shooting over 50% from three. That'll be going downward, though. The team as a whole is shooting 28.6% from three. That should be going northward, and for Ohio, they're still not a team that's going to be dominating the glass, but Jalen Breath, he is a breath of fresh air coming over from UNC Greensboro, where he was able to give that team over 5 rebounds per game. For Bethune Cookman, they're a team that they do a nice job in terms of generating turnovers, but they're still only about 198th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got a lot of moving pieces that are a bit of a work in progress, and with Ohio, they've been a relatively mid-tempo team to this point, despite playing some pretty up-tempo foes like Louisville and company. They're currently 159th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bethune-Cookman inside the top 100 with regards to total possessions per game. Part of that is because they had an overtime game against Auburn, though. So, set a total of 155.5. I like the under with Ohio. I'm willing to lay up to 9 with them. 306-571, 306-572. Our nation's first president, George Washington, plays us at UMBC. UMBC, a 23 to 23.5 point underdogs. Total is between 163 to 163.5, and our nation's first president got the job done at the Battle of Trenton, and I certainly do think that he's going to be able to get it done against a pack of retrievers. That said, I do think that this number has went a little bit too far. I set my line at 21, so going to be willing to take the points with the UMBC, who all of a sudden, after the last few seasons under Jim Ferry, have been one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. They're now outside the top 275 in terms of possessions per 40 minutes. DJ Armstrong, who comes up from the non-D1 ranks, he had 2 game winners for the team in 1 week, being able to will them past Morgan State and then getting the job done against Wagner in overtime. So he's been rock solid in the backcourt, give you 14 points per game, while Ace Valentine, he has been an ace for the team, giving up 5.5 assists per game. It's not quite the same UMBC team with the backcourt that we've seen in past seasons. They have been turning the ball over about 15 times per contest, and the three-point shooting still solid. They're shooting 36% from three-point as a collective, with Armstrong really being the main headliner, shooting 54% from three-point. But this is going to be a team that's going to be taking it on the chin down low, with having a George Washington team that just it feels like they're Noah's Ark. They have absolutely 2 of everything, including some rock-solid low-post play with Luke Hunger coming on over, giving this team about 7.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest after he began his career over at Northwestern. Rafael Castro has been within the program over the last few years. He and Tyrone Marshall, who comes over from Western Kentucky, both give you about 7 boards per contest. Trey Dinkins has done a nice job in terms of facilitating good, clean offense. He last season over at Duquesne was that main scorer for them with about 13 points per game. He's up that to 14 points per contest and is currently shooting 46% from 3 points for a collective that they're not necessarily shooting at the world's greatest from 3. Like, this 34% 3-point shooting is very sustainable moving forward. They're allowing opponents to shoot only 26% from 3. I do think that that's going to be going a little bit northward moving forward, but for UMBC, they've been able to do a pretty rock solid job in terms of holding opponents to shooting only about 30% from 3-point themselves. They've been able to do a nice job in terms of holding teams to only 1 shot and not giving up a lot of second and third chances as well. So do think that UMBC does just enough to be able to hold in this game. And with UMBC really cranking down their tempo, I'm in on the under. Semi total at a 161. So going to be taking those points with the UMBC and the under. 306-573, 306-574. Wofford plays us in North Florida. The Mighty Buddy Osprey are a 7.5 to an 8-point dog. Total is between 160.5 to a 161. With Wofford, I did make them a favorite of 12 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. For North Florida, shock, surprise, surprise. They're struggling on defense once again this year outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That is the North Florida system. And for North Florida, they're always looking to bomb it from 3-point range. Last year, they took over 52% of their shots from 3-point range. They've been a little bit less than that this season, despite the fact that you still have some nice pieces in the backcourt. Ken Jackson is someone that was beginning his career over at Jacksonville. He's come in, he's been able to give the team 12 points per contest, shooting about 33% from 3-point range. And Kamarian Oriole, he's one of the main holdovers from a season ago. Last year, he was a 6th man that gave the team 7.5 points, shot about 35% from 3 with an assist per contest, but now he needs to run a little bit of everything, with North Florida losing pretty much her top 4 scorers from a season ago. Devin Hines is someone that comes over from Lafayette, and he dealt with a lot of injury last year. 2 years ago in a full season over at Lafayette, about 10 points per game, shot 33.5% from 3-point, but you're really lacking that main facilitation for a North Florida team. So you've got a team that really wants to bomb it from 3, but they're turning the ball over 13 times per game, and they themselves are really giving it up on the inside because you have a team that does shoot so many threes. They're outside the top 300 with regards to their rebound percentage, and I do think that that's where this team is really going to be outdone, as you do have a unit here in Wofford that had a lot of just strangeness in the offseason, to say the least, with having their coach that led them to the NCAA tournament, Dwight Perry, getting canned at the last minute, and Kevin Giltner, who he was with the program quite a few years ago as a player. He comes over after being an assistant over at Virginia Tech for the former Wofford coach in Mike Young. And you've got Niles Malkowski, who's come over from Central Florida. He had some nice moments for them, and he's been able to get the team 14 points, 3 assists per game. They're still waiting for Caden Bosco to really get it going. Last season, he was over at Central Michigan, gave that team 5 boards, 7.5 points, shot over 40% from threes, only averaging 5.5 points on less than 30% three-point shooting this season. But Brendan Rigsby, I think, is a little bit of an upside guy. He comes over from the non-D1 ranks, and he's done a solid job being able to supply about 3 rebounds per game down low for a unit that they don't necessarily have ideal size. Rex Sterling at 6'8" is one of the lone guys that really has size down low. And Callum Richard, he comes over from East Carolina, is yet to be able to find his footing in terms of this rotation. But even with that lack of size, you just have a North Florida team that doesn't hold up down low. And I do think that Wofford starting to find their bearings in terms of this offense. They've been doing a good job in terms of not allowing teams to be able to get too many open looks from three-point range, and I think that that's going to allow them to be able to get the job done here. I did set my total at a 158 with Wofford. They're playing a little bit faster than they have in past seasons, but I just don't think that North Florida hits their shots to be able to give you the over. So I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Wofford. 36-575, 36-576. Notre Dame is playing us at Bellarmine. Bellarmine, 27.5 point underdogs with a total between 150 to 150.5, and I made Notre Dame a 28-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Notre Dame. They didn't get the win against Ohio State over the weekend, but they played very, very competitively. That was a nice grind-em-out game where neither team got past 65 points. And for Micah Shrewsbury, he now has a core that's able to rebound. You bring in Carson Towd, who is only giving the team 6.5 points per game, but he is doubling that up with his rebounds. 13 rebounds per game. And you've got Marcus Burton, one of the best two-at-all players in all of college basketball. He's coming off of averaging 20 points per game last season. He's able to give out 3+ assists per contest, but now he has to do a little bit less down low because now you do have Towd, and he's been averaging about 18 points per game. He's been able to get some good help from Brendan Shrewsbury, who's been in the system with his father, Micah Shrewsbury, and he's right now supplying 12.5 points per game. Sir Muhammad, who's been really not a guy that has been able to elevate quite yet with regards to his offense, but that said, he's been able to supply the team with some nice ancillary scoring, 7 points, and he's been doling out about 3 assists per game as well. The Shrewsbury system is based around not turning the ball over and finding good looks from 3. Right now, the team is turning the ball over about 12 times per contest, but that said, they're also shooting over 40% from 3, and they're allowing opponents to only shoot about 30% from the outside as well. And then, well, on the flip side, you have a Bellarmine team that out of 364 Division I teams last season, they were 363rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Bellarmine, you bring back Jack Karzinski, who last season he was one of the main scorers. He dealt with a little bit of injury, but at 6'7", shot in the high 30s from 3, 14+ points per contest. But you also have a changeover from Scott Davenport to Doug Davenport. Bellarmine's never necessarily been an up-tempo team, always outside the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game. But this team, since they came up to the Division I ranks, always outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. They're typically based around not turning the ball over themselves, but they've been turning the ball over about 12.5 times per game. And what is supposed to be a strength of theirs in three-point shooting, they're currently shooting less than 30% from three-point range, as they just haven't been able to find guys to be able to help out Karzinski too much. You've got Brian Waddell, who's been able to supply the team with about 4.5 points per contest. They're looking at Michael Wilson, a guy that at 6'6" is a non-Division I guy that's come up. He's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game, but you've got a lot of question marks in terms of this Bellarmine team. They just don't feel like a Division I roster at this point. And Miles Watkins, who they were banking on to be able to ascend a little bit after last year, gave the team about 6.5 points per contest. He's yet to do that. He's only scored 18 points in the first 4 games of the season. Now, I did set my total at 152, which just frankly how bad the Bellarmine defense is and the way that Notre Dame should be able to get open looks. I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 27.5 here with Notre Dame. 3-6-5-77, 3-6-5-78. Merrimack plays us at Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine as 5.5 point underdogs. 128.5 is the total, and I set a line of a 132 in terms of the total. Going to be in on the over with Merrimack. They're not generating as many turnovers as they have in past seasons. Now, part of that is you play against a team like Auburn to begin the season. That's obviously a very rock-solid bunch. They were able to get the job done against Boston U, but that's a team that looks a little bit more down low, and then they let off the season against a good, solid South Dakota State team. But it does feel like they've got a little bit more pop in terms of their three-point shooting. 33.5% three-point shooting doesn't sound impressive, but it's better than it has been in the past. You're bringing Andres Marrero 2 seasons ago over at Salle was averaging like 7 to 8 points per game, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point. Todd Brogna is a guy with really good versatility over at Stonehill last season. 12.5 points, 7 boards, shot nearly 40% for 3 at 6'7", and you've got on the other end a Maine unit that has always relied upon being able to generate turnovers themselves. Kellen Tynes last year was giving you 3+ steals per game. Jane Clayton wasn't too much of a scorer, but he would give out 4.5 assists per game, and they had overall pretty much an entire backcourt, and they have yet to find that main facilitator. You don't have a single guy give you over 2 assists per game, and that's caused them to be losing the turnover battle to begin the season, and they're now only shooting about 30% from 3, which I don't think is going to be going too much northward to take a look at the rest of the season. But you do have Ryan Mabry, who I do like. He was over at Quinnipiac and Miami of Ohio in recent seasons, and 2 years ago over at Miami of Ohio was a 36% three-point shooter with about 7 points per contest as a sixth man. He's come in, he's been able to give you 10 points per contest. TJ Beal, who began his career over at Southeast Missouri State, he's been supplying the team with about 12 points, 5 rebounds per game, but don't have a lot of size. You're going to be looking at Ace Flagg, that is actually the brother of Cooper Flagg, to be able to help out with that regard as a freshman. 6 points, 5 rebounds per game. He has a little bit of ability to pop it from 3, but doesn't have quite as much ability as his brother does. Let's call it what it is. There's a reason why he wasn't as highly touted as his brother Cooper Flagg, but that said, I do think that with Merrimack, they're going to be able to get back to their roots a little bit more, generate some turnovers, and I do think that for Maine, who's right now allowing opponents to shoot 22% from 3, they're going to see a lot of regression with that. Semi-total 132. Think that this is close enough for late game felling. Like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Merrimack. 36.579, 36.580. South Carolina State plays us to Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a road favorite of 9.5 points. So on this game between 158 to 158.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Chattanooga. Set them as a 13.5 point favorite. You got a South Carolina State team that was very much based around just presenting a whole bunch of different looks and depth last season. They were a bunch that was able to do a pretty rock solid job on defense, and they lose pretty much 8 out of their top 10 scorers from a year ago, so they don't have that depth anymore. And now you've got for a Chattanooga's team that always loves to bomb from 3-point range, a little bit more of a normal schedule. They really have some bad metrics right now because they had to play that strange West Coast back-to-back against St. Mary's and UNLV. They lose both of those games in convincing fashion, and the game against Florida Gulf Coast a few days ago was a little bit less than tremendous as well, but this is still a squad that they love to be able to shoot it from 3, and they're shooting about 34.5% from the outside. It's not quite what it was a season ago when they had Hunter Huff and company, but Jordan Frinson has come in. He's been able to give this team 12 points. He's shooting over 40% from 3-point. Jacques Johnson, who comes on up from the non-D1 ranks, he's been a solid north of 40% 3-point shooter. I feel like Coach Earl has been always able to do a good job in terms of finding good, clean offense, has done a good job with these mix-and-match freshmen, and they paired him up with Tedrick Washington, who was over at Southeast Missouri State last season. Not a guy that's really going to bomb from 3, but he just does a little bit of everything well at about 6'2", 6'3", 14 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per game over at Southeast Missouri State. That should be able to help elevate this defense a little bit, but for South Carolina State, this is typically a team that they love to play up tempo. They're actually typically in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. The problem for the South Carolina State team is that you really just don't have anyone to be able to run the offense right now. They are looking to someone in Jaden Johnson to be able to give you a little bit of that. He's one of the few holdovers from last season. Last season, about 5 points, 2.5 assists per game, but he's not really a guy that's going to light you up from 3-point range, and don't have much of that on the roster. They're shooting 31% from 3-point range, and the just great defense that you were able to get down low, Drayton Jones and company, that's gone as well. As this team is outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage. You don't have a single guy on the roster give you over 4.5 rebounds per game. They're looking to play with a lot of depth. They're looking to have a lot of guys playing a bunch of minutes in general, but when you just lose those great, good, solid pieces from a season ago, and now you're looking at someone like a Noah Treadwell who comes on up from the non-Division I ranks. Owen Bronson Jr. has been able to give you 13 points per contest. He's been a nice, pleasant surprise as a little bit of a non-Division I transfer as well. It just leaves you a little bit hampered, and the team is turning the ball over 18.5 times per game with all this transition. So I do think that that's going to prevent you from getting it over. Semi-total 155.5. I like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Chattanooga. 36.581, 36.582. Duquesne is going to be playing out to Loyola, Maryland. Loyola, Maryland, an underdog of 11.5 points. So on this game, it is 148.5, and with Loyola. I set them as an underdog of 16.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up. With Duquesne, last year they were outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Sloppy on offense, but pretty solid on defense. This year they've really been able to elevate that offense because you've got a guy that began his career out there in the Pittsburgh area, being able to elevate you. And John Hughley, you may remember him from the Panthers. Well, he's back in the city of Pittsburgh, and he's supplying this Duquesne team with 17 points, 7 boards. At 6'9", he's got the ability to be able to pop a few threes as well. You learned that over at Oklahoma, and he's been really good playing off of Terrence Gunyard, who has been running the show ever since coming over from UT Martin. And over at UT Martin last year, he gave that team 16.5 points, a little bit of facilitation, 2.5 assists per game, a little bit more of a hardcore facilitation role this year, but also a nice go-to scorer with 21 points per game, shooting over 45% from three, so he's been doing it all. And for Duquesne, they've taken a little bit of a setback with regards to their defense. They're giving up a lot of second and third chances on the glass, but teams are not getting good looks from three. They're shooting less than 20% from the outside, with Maximus Edwards providing good versatility over at George Washington 2 years ago, was a 10-plus point per game scorer, had a little bit of a disappointing year last year, but he and Jimmy Williams are now combining for 22 points per game. And Loyola Maryland has a lot of guys that have been within the system, but a lot of guys that haven't necessarily been able to elevate, and now you lose pretty much at size with the Elich brothers down low from a season ago. They've been looking to Jonas Saradustu, who comes over from Lithuania to be able to give you about 6 boards per contest, and Jacob Theodorusu, who he was over at Wyoming to begin his career. Last year gave the team 13 points per game. He's been solid as well, but this is also a Loyola Maryland team that they have had a tough time with regards to their perimeter offense. They're shooting about 32% from three, on par with what they did a season ago. They're taking relatively okay care of the ball with Braden Speed back in the backcourt, but Tyson Commander's never really been able to take a stride forward, and this is also a squad that is not giving themselves second chances. They're outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. Loyola Maryland typically outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, so I did set a total here of a 144.5. I'm going to be one thing shot in the under while laying it with Duquesne. I did set Duquesne as a favorite of 16.5. 306-583, 306-584. We've got Tennessee Tech on the road against USC Upstate. Upstate is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite. Totals between 150 to 150.5. Set a total of 157.5. I like the over. USC Upstate last year was well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Upstate was a pretty up-tempo team a season ago. I don't think that they're going to be quite as up-tempo this season, but right now they're checking in 291st in terms of total possessions per game. I certainly do think that that's going to be going northward, and you got a Tennessee Tech team that has been just all over the place under this current tenure, and I don't think that that's going to be changing anytime soon, but for Upstate, I think the big key is the fact that you bring back a few guards from a season ago. You've got Carmel Adkins along with Kamari Gregory back from a year ago, and these two guys are right now combining for about 30.5 points per game. You really have nothing down low with this team. You've got Nick Book, who stands 6'8". He's been able to give the team a few rebounds per game, but it's not as if the Tennessee Tech team has a lot either. As Tennessee Tech, they had a nice big man down low, and Daniel Igbaniwe, who was giving you about 6 rebounds per game a season ago. He's now on the fold, so you're looking to Danny Pounds. That's a great name. He's been able to give the team 5.5 rebounds per game coming over from Old Dominion, where he had some good rebounds over there, but it's not too much of an offensive presence. They're looking to Judge Juan Nichols along with Makai Cameron to really run the show for this team. These guys are combining for about 24.5 points per game in the backcourt, and Cameron has been able to shoot about 42% from three-point range, and Brandon Muntu, he was over at Western Michigan last season, was a relatively nice off-the-bench scorer, gave that team 5.5 points per game, but has been a career about 32% three-point shooter. With Tennessee Tech, they've always left something to be desired on defense. Last year, they were well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and to their credit, they're right now really hitting their twos. They're shooting over 64% from two-point range, but that three-point shooting is leaving a lot to be desired. I do think that with USC Upstate having everything that they do in the backcourt, they do find a way to be able to persevere in this one, and hey, we saw Upstate be able to go on the road and knock off Fresno State about a week or so ago as well. I think they get a higher scoring game. Both of these teams very inefficient with regards to their defense, so set a total of 157.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay with Upstate. 306-585, 306-586. Virginia Tech is playing us a Bryant. Bryant is a 25 to 25.5 point dog. 147 to 147.5 is the total, and set Virginia Tech as a 23.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to take the points. Now with Bryant, it's been a little bit of a slog for them on offense to begin the season, but there's reason to believe things are starting to pick up. They were able to get past the 75 point plateau against Dartmouth, and with a lot of moving parts. You've got your number one of the Javion Christian style. It does feel like things are starting to gel. You got a do-it-all guy in Quincy Allen, who began his career over at Colorado, a former top 150 recruit that was solid when he was out there on the floor over at Chicago State. Really just dealt with a lot of injuries, but he's right now supplying that good, just a little bit of everything, 10 points, 5.5 boards, generating about 2 steals, 2.5 blocks per game. You'll love what he's able to bring to the table. The big question for this team is who's going to be that main facilitator. Ty Tables, who's a guy that is a true freshman, has been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game, and their top scorer is a freshman, Tim Foley Rudovilski. He's come in, he's been able to get the team 13 points per game, a little bit of an international man of mystery who comes over from Russia, did spend his high school years out there in Arizona, but it's left this team hampered with that regard, and they're also a team that just is not able to get points inside. They're about 345th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but they've also been able to do a relatively okay job grabbing some second and third chances themselves. They're not really forcing the issue on defense. They're only generating about 9.5 turnovers per game, which that's big for a Virginia Tech team that has now had 6'8" Nicolas Avadeas come over from Greece to really run the show for the team. 16 points, 6 assists. He's been shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. And Virginia Tech shooting its collective 37.5% from three-point range. They become a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they're having a tough time on the glass. They're allowing opponents to grab 14.5 offensive rebounds per game. This despite the fact that down low, Toby Lual, Amani Hansberry have been able to combine for about 20 rebounds per game. Both are really nice post presence down low. Lual is able to give you that element of three-point shooting as well. At 6'8" last season, shot about 37% from three-point range, and at VCU actually shot over 40% from three-point range, but I do think that for Virginia Tech, having a little bit of a rough go of it on defense, these Mike Young teams over at Virginia Tech have always been outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's going to be a little bit costly here. Virginia Tech running good, clean offense. They're turning the ball over less than 8 times per game, so I did set a higher total here of a 149.5. I do like the over, but for Brian, it does feel like things are starting to get going under Javion Christian. I'm going to be willing to take those points. 306-587, 306-588. UNC Asheville's on the road against Western Carolina. Western Carolina is a favorite here. 1.5 points total on this game. It is 155.5 to a 156, and with Western Carolina, made them a 2.5 point favorite. So, going to be one to lay the 1 to 1.5 with Western Carolina. They did bring back quite a few guys from a season ago, including Cord Stansberry, who's a double figure scorer for this unit. Marcus Kell, who dealt with a little bit of injury 2 seasons ago. He's been able to come back, and he's been really your main guy in terms of rebounding. 6.5 boards, 13 points per game, and then you have some underrated sides with Abduli Fanta Kaba coming on over from Denver. Over at Denver, he was just with injury last season. He's been able to give the team 7 boards per contest, and with Julian Swarmo, who was over at Gardner-Webb 2 seasons ago, being able to give you a little bit more facilitation with 3 assists per game as they wait for Dejan Dumasi, who he was over at Southern last season. And when he was over at Southern 2 years ago, because he got injured last season, he was giving that team 9 points, 5.5 assists per game. Has not looked like himself this season. They've been easing him back in the rotation. That's allowed this Western Carolina team to be a little bit more efficient on offense. Last year, they were well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Still turning the ball over about 16 times per game, but this is on an Asheville team that's really going to be pressing the issue. You do have an Asheville team that has been themselves turning the ball over about 14.5 times per game because they always look for good, efficient three-point shots, but you don't necessarily have the same three-point shooting as you did last year with Fletcher AB and company. I do like what Justin Wright brings to the table. He was over at NC Central for the longest time. Last year, even at Loyola Marymount as a part-time starter, he gave that team 11 points per contest, career 38.5% three-point shooter, and Toya Solomon might be the best rebounder in this game. Last year for this team, 13 plus points, 7 plus rebounds per game. He's duplicating those numbers once again, but they're really looking at Cameron Taylor, 6'7", do-it-all sort of player that was a nice piece for them last year. Off the bench, 9 points, 4 boards. They're looking for him to be able to elevate a little bit more, but he's not too much of a three-point shooter. It is an Asheville team that they really do give it up on the inside as well right now in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, the percentage of missed shots by opponents that they allow to be a rebound. They're outside the top 3 with that regard. I do think that Western Carolina is going to be able to do a little bit better job down low and find a way to get the job done against a team that is right now dealing with an injury to DJ Turned It Up Patrick, who he's been around the Big South for quite a while, and the Rhode Island transfer in Connor Dubitsky. I did set my line at a 2.5, so going to be one to lay with Western Carolina. Did set my total at a 154.5 with Asheville not being the same three-point shooting team as in past years, so also in on the under. 306-589, 306-590. Bradley plays also UMass Lowell. Lowell is a Lowell underdog of 19.5 points, 149 to 149.5 is the total, and made Bradley a 24.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with UMass Lowell. They lost pretty much everything from a season ago, and they really didn't do a great job in terms of being able to replace it. And for UMass Lowell, they're outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They are really not doing a great job on the glass as well, and that's a big reason why they were able to have so much success in recent seasons. They had guys that were able to do a good job being able to grab those rebounds, and now you just don't have too much of that. You've got one guy on the roster that's giving you over 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Austin Green, who comes over from Texas State, and he at 6'8" has had to do a little bit of everything for the team. 12.5 points, 6.5 boards. Not necessarily a guy that pops it from 3, but you need him to be able to just get a little bit of help. JJ Massaquoi, he comes in, he's been able to give the team 14 points per contest, so he's been able to help a little bit, but you don't necessarily have a ton in terms of just ball handling and ball security. The team has been turning the ball over 14 times per game, as Xavier Spencer has had the ball in his hands quite a bit as a non-D1 transfer with about 4 assists. He's been able to supply the team with about 9 points per game, but is getting plenty sloppy with it. You've got a Bradley team on the flip side that is generating over 17 turnovers per game, and they should be able to do a better job on the glass. Bradley has been outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but after last year, Bradley was a top 5 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They're shooting a hearty 26.5% from 3. Now, they did lose quite a bit of that backcourt from a season ago, but there's reason to believe that these guys are going to be able to have that go northward, as Corey Thomas last year at 6'9", he shot for the team 37% for 3 with 4.5 points per contest. Currently shooting 20% from 3. He should be seeing that going northward. Demarion Birch, he last season was able to supply about 6 points and shot 56% from 3. He knew that that was not sustainable, but he's been dealing with a little bit of ailment. Should be getting back into the lineup, if not this game, in the next few games. You've got Quan Johnson as well, who's been able to do a nice job in terms of giving this team a little bit of direction. He's generating over 3 steals, 19 points, 3 assists per contest, but he's shooting just 23.5% from 3 after last year. That was more like 35% from 3, and this team should be able to dominate down low. You've got Timothy Van Knapp, who's come over, giving this team about 3.5 boards per contest, and Yemet Janovic, he's a 7'1" big man. Right now only supplying about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game, but should have his way down low with the UMass Lowell team has been brutal on the glass. Somebody told 146.5. I don't think that UMass Lowell does their part with the total with how sloppy they are on offense, and this is a Bradley team that typically plays a little bit more slowly in terms of total possessions per game thus far this season, 265th, so in on the under to go along with Bradley laying the number, 36.591, 36.592. Belmont plays us at Lipscomb, and Lipscomb does find themselves as a 12.5 to a 13-point dog. 157.5 is the total, and I set Lipscomb as an underdog of 14 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Belmont. Nice intercity rivalry here, but for Belmont, I absolutely love what Tyler Lundblade brings to the table. Last year gave the team double figures while shooting over 46% from 3-point range, and keep in mind that this is going to be a bunch that just gets more and more used to Nick McClain in the backcourt. He was over at Eastern Washington last season where he gave that team 10.5 points, 4 assists per contest. He has stepped in right away and hasn't had too much of a scoring punch for this team right now. He's only giving you about 7 points per contest, has yet to make a 3-point shot, but 6.3 assists per game. He's been able to do a good job of being able to get someone like Sam Orme, who had 6'8" last season, shot in the high 30s from 3, gave that team double figures. Just some good looks. Orme right now, 15 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. It's on a Belmont team that's doing a great job in terms of being able to generate second and third chances, but they do go up against a Lipscomb unit that they themselves, under the tutelage of Kevin Carroll, comes on up from the non-D1 ranks. He was a good Division II coach over at Southwest Nazarene last season. They've had their issues in terms of being able to get good, clean offense themselves, shooting just 28% from 3-point. You've got a lot of guys that are sort of mixing and matching, like you maintain Grant Asman along with Charlie Williams from a season ago. Those are 2 big men that have been able to combine for this team about 10 rebounds per contest, but the backcourt is all brand spanking new. You bring in someone like a Ross Caladino, who he was beginning his career actually at Wisconsin for the Badgers. He spent a little bit of time at the non-D1 ranks. He's come into Lipscomb. He's had a tough time finding minutes up until this year. They're not looking at him as being one of the main guys, giving the team 12.5 points per game. You do have Mateo Esmeraldo doing a solid job in terms of giving out about 6.5 assists per game after he stepped down to the non-Division I ranks, but is not really a threat in terms of being able to pop it from 3, give you a whole heck of a lot there, and this is a team that's relying upon just tough tenacity in general and trying to be able to generate turnovers, but it hasn't worked out for them. They're giving up nearly 80 points per game, and they are gambling for turnovers and allowing opponents to shoot over 40% from 3 as a result, and this is a Belmont team that they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. So did somebody told once again 64. I like the over with Belmont. One to lay up to 13.5 with them. And we wrap things up with 306.593, 306.594. Auburn plays us to Jackson State. Jackson State, an underdog of 30.5 to 31.5 points. Total on this game, 153.5 to 155.5, and made my total 155.5. So at a 155 or less, I'm in on the over. Now Jackson State has been a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of their rebound percentage, and they're going to lose that battle against Keyshawn Allows right now. For Auburn, give you over 20 points, 7 boards, shooting it well from 3-point range, but I do like this backcourt. You've got Dorian McMillan back after he gave the team double figures last year. Jamie Mitchell dealt with a little bit of ailment towards the back half of the season last year and just throughout his career over at Jackson State, but he's coming off of averaging 10.5 points per contest on 37% 3-point shooting last year. He's up to about 13.5 points and is currently shooting a blistering 53% for 3. And Deshaun Ruffin, former top 75 recruit who saw really good minutes over at Ole Miss, he's been able to give the team 15 points per game. Now, the key is you need to have one of these freshmen like a Kobe Butler, Kendrick Simmons, someone like that, just give you a little bit more on the glass, but you do have to fear a bit of a letdown spot for Auburn as well. They play that really tough game against Houston, and after this game, they have to go to the Players Invitational out here in lovely Las Vegas, where they're going to be playing a bunch of really good competition as well. And the backcourt for Auburn has not really gotten it going. They're shooting less than 30% for 3. Todd Pettiford is a really nice piece. He's given the team 12 points per contest, but he's also shooting 22% from 3-point range. Kevin Overton was a nice ancillary piece a season ago over at Texas Tech and began his career at Drake, where last year over at Texas Tech as a 6-man, 8 points per contest. He's more of a complimentary guy and has never really been like an incredible 3-point shooter at 34%, so I do think that Auburn is going to need to look to a little bit more of the defensive side of things with regards to their backcourt, and they're not really generating a lot of turnovers. Only about 11.5 turnovers per game, despite the fact that aside from that game against Houston, you've faced off against some outmatched competition. They had that overtime game against Bethune Cookman, and I do think that for Auburn, they're going to absolutely be able to dominate the glass because lost in everything that Keyshawn Hall is doing. You've got Emeka Oparum, who's a true 7-footer that's been able to give the team 5.5 rebounds per game. But that said, I do think that with the Jackson State team, they're going to be looking to crank up the tempo just a little bit. And this is an Auburn team that they've been playing with a lot of pace as well. Right now for Auburn, they're about 142nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Jackson State unit that probably playing a little bit too fast for their own good, about 125th in terms of total possessions per game and very much giving it up on the inside. So I think that Jackson State finds some looks from the outside. Auburn gets those looks inside. Semi-line at 25.5. I like the over and the points here with Jackson State, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Colby Marchio. He does great work over at Your Betting News with the show Up Your Units. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you hear podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM. Maybe it does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.